Okay, good afternoon. The time is now 1:07 p.m. This is the regular meeting of the Los Angeles Unified School District Board of Education, which was continued from 3/21/2023. The date is now March 27th, 2023. And I'm going to take roll call. Dr. McKenna.
Here.
Dr. Rivas.
Present.
Mr. Schmorelson.
Present.
Ms. Gomez. Ms. Ortiz-Franklin.
Present.
Board President Goldberg.
Here.
And student member Mr. Shin.
Present.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The student board member, Mr. Shin, I have asked to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our rescheduled board meeting. It was scheduled a week ago almost, and events made that unlikely to happen. As you probably know, last Friday, LA Unified reached agreement with SEIU Local 99 on a new contract. It significantly increases salaries for their close to 30,000 members, and it addresses historic pay inequities. It creates a massive expansion of health care benefits for part-time employees, and it invests resources into professional development for our employees. I know my colleagues join me in thanking Mayor Karen Bass for stepping in to help reach this agreement. We also wish to acknowledge and thank Superintendent Carvalho and Executive Director of SEIU Local 99, Max Arias, for negotiating in good faith. We hope and expect that negotiations with UTLA will continue to go well. Okay, now let's turn to our labor partners, and I see Mr. Paez here. Come forward and welcome.
And just before you go, Mr. Nick Melvoin, are you with us via Zoom?
Present.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. And Ms. Gomez?
I'm here.
Okay,
Hi,
great.
we're all
My
here
apologies.
down at
Superintendent and senior staff. My name is Neri Pais, and I'm the proud president of 3100 Associated Administrators of Los Angeles. I wanted to thank the labor relations team for our sessions as we get closer to concluding our Unit J classified contract. Moreover, I look forward to salary reopener talks for our certificated contract. I hope the district can demonstrate to our members that it wants to respect, retain, and reward our frustrated, overwhelmed, mentally and physically exhausted administrators at schools and offices. We hope that our schools can have an uninterrupted rest of the school year with no natural disasters or human activities to stop instruction. Instructional leaders can produce more academic decathlon champions, Science Bowl winners, arts winners, and magnet recognition at the state and federal levels. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Next, we will hear from the Independent Analysis Unit. Andrew Thomas, director of it, is here to give a brief report. Mr. Thomas.
Good afternoon, Board President Goldberg, members of the Board of Education, district staff, Superintendent Carvalho. I just want to give you a quick update. This will tee you up for the committee reports that you're about to give. I just want to give you a quick update on how we're supporting board committees. As you know, the new focus of the IAU is supporting board members, the board as a whole, and board committees. So I'm focusing right now on the committee piece. And I just want to remind you that what's happening now at the close of these committees is there's an action step section. There's a report that comes out at the end of each committee, a template that has a what we learned section and an action item section. And the IAU has been attending all of the committee meetings and taking notes on the action items or the next steps or the follow-up items. And now we're introducing the next step of the process, which is refining assigning, and tracking the next items. So we take our notes, we refine them in conjunction with the chairs of the committee meetings and their staff, and then we take those refined items, follow-up items, to the superintendent's designee. And then those items are assigned to somebody on the district staff. And then what we do is we're going to create a shared document that is a log and a tracking document that everybody can see. And it's going to have the action item, the follow-up item, who it's assigned to, and a deadline so that we all know what's going on. So that's the next step. And after that, we'll worry about collecting all of the items, really following up and presenting them to the committee meetings. But right now, we're refining, assigning, and tracking. And I will keep you all informed about how that goes in the next couple of weeks. Thanks.
Also, we have some committee reports. So, Board Member Dr. Rivas, I believe you have a report from the Greening Committee.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So the Green Schools and Climate Resilience Committee met on March 15th. And the topics that we discussed was 100% clean energy by 2040 goal and a bus fleet electrification. What the committee learned, the Chief Facilities Executive, Mr. Mark Hovatter, and the Director of Transportation, Mr. Daniel Kang, gave a progress update on the district's goal of bus electrification and transitioning to 100% renewable energy by 2040. The accomplishments and the challenges. The district is slated to have 150 electric buses and the required infrastructure by mid-2024. The need for a comprehensive plan to guide the transition after 2024, the desire for progress reports from staff that includes benchmarks, need to build partnerships with external agencies such as Metro and DWP, and develop a process for capturing federal and state resources to fund the transition. And the action items that I have here is staff to come back with progress reports focused on benchmarks towards the 2040 goals, issue of best value contracts in manufacturing to be examined more closely in the Facilities and Procurement Committee, and lastly, how can the committee board better support the transition through resource allocation, external partnerships, and connecting with state and federal resources. So overall, it's a very informative committee, and we look forward to working with the IAU and the Superintendent's Office on following up on some of these action items. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much. And next, we will hear from Board Member Ortiz Franklin on the Innovation Committee.
Thank you, and thanks for your suggestion on looking at school model types. We took on 2 of them this time, magnet schools and pilot schools, looking at the history, why they were created, what gains they're seeing with student outcomes, and we had 2 schools present as well. We have a couple of follow-up items that you heard from Mr. Thomas about how we'll go about doing that, but it sparked a lot of interesting conversation around increasing offerings like CTE, internships, electives, things that pilot schools and magnet schools are able to do because of how they were created. Pilot schools being on thinner contracts created by the teachers themselves, magnet schools having a focus that recruits kids from all over the district and provides transportation beyond a certain boundary. There were a couple of small ideas like donation links to school websites so that we're not doing everything through cash. And some things that the schools were doing we thought we could understand better and maybe use outside of those school models like block schedules. So trying to understand the impact on student outcomes. We have a few follow-ups that we'll share with the team. I did want to ask, Madam President, if you wanted me to mention on the California School Board Association. We've had some meetings recently with the Board of Directors and the Legislative Committee, which I serve on behalf of this board here. First of all, the Board of Directors was really glad to visit a couple of our schools last month, had great things to say about LA Unified in general, and we, as a board, are implementing a new strategic plan for the State Board of School Boards, Association for School Boards, which is interesting because LA Unified, of course, we have our own strategic plan. That will start in July. And on the legislative side, there was a legislative action week with over 100 visits with legislators across the state, prioritizing maintaining LCFF and COLA. This board has had concerns about losing the arts grant, so there were a lot of meetings pushing for that, a lot of senators on our side. And the California School Board Association is sponsoring a couple of bills around cybersecurity, around administrator to teacher ratios, and around county probation schools. So good work happening on the state front.
Thank you very much for both those reports. And if you let me know when you want to do that, I'll just add it to the calendar that says you'll do a report on that and on CSBA. All right, we now come to the part that some people have trouble understanding, which is how do we put things on the consent calendar when we haven't actually heard them here at a board meeting? Well, this is how it works. Each board member has an opportunity to meet either alone or in groups of 3, never 4, with staff to ask questions about everything coming forward on the agenda for the board meeting. So each board member has already done his or her research on what we're here about. So we put a lot of items, sometimes all of the items, on consent. Doesn't mean we won't hear from the public on them, and it doesn't mean that there couldn't even be questions asked. It means that the board members decided that even if they have questions, they don't rise enough to the amount that would cause them to vote no on the item, so it might as well be on consent. And so I'm going to go through each item, excuse me, and ask board members whether they want it on consent, and if it's on consent, whether or not they would like to have that item dealt with in terms of being able still to ask some questions in public. So let me start from the beginning with item 1. Let me tell you, with item 1, items B and C have been withdrawn. So B and C will not be on this item. So this is procurement. What is procurement? It means some of this is ratifying contracts that we've already given the authority to the superintendent to do with delegated authority. And then items that are new contracts for goods and services, general contracts. How do you want this, on consent, off consent?
Consent.
Are there any people who have questions now that you know B and C are gone? Maybe that reduces them. Question? Okay. Item number 2, define and approve 26 board priority district and region priority district, and therefore amend the facilities strategic execution plan to incorporate them. These are items in which board members are permitted to use up to a certain amount of money each year to try and help specific needs around facilities needs at schools. Sometimes it's a buzzer, sometimes it's a camera, sometimes it's privacy fencing, things like that. Are there any people who would like to, is this going on consent?
Consent.
Okay, anybody had questions on them? Okay, there will be a presentation later in this meeting on that item. Item number 3 is an update of phase 3 of the drinking water quality program. I'm sorry, that's the one that has the presentation. And to amend the facility services. So we have been working for some years, and this item would recommend an update and approval of $33 million to phase 3 of the drinking water quality program to install water bottle filling stations and upgrade drinking water fountains to bring them to levels below 5 parts per billion, which we believe will be the new standard, and it should be the standard whether it is or not. Anybody want to, shall this go on consent?
Consent.
I just have a question.
Okay, a question? Okay. Yes. Anybody else? Questions? No, okay. All right. Item number 4 is Facility Service Division, and this has to do with resolutions authorizing the performance of all necessary functions related to the CalShape ventilation program of March 21st, 2023. And this deals with performing necessary functions to make sure that CalShape, which is schools, health, air, plumbing, and efficiency ventilation programs. On consent?
Consent.
Questions? Questions. Item number 5, approve 4 sustainable environmental enhancement development for school projects. We call it SEEDS. Projects, and amend Facilities Services Division strategic execution plan to deal with these. Is this on consent?
I have questions.
You have a question? Mm-hmm. Okay, let me see. Did I see your hand too, Kelly? Okay. So 3 have. Dr. Rivas. Okay. Item number 6, define and approve 3 accessibility enhancement projects, 2 burial removal projects, and amend the definition to deal with this. This deals with dealing with projects that have to do with making schools more accessible to students with disabilities and so forth. And it lists the schools that are to be involved, which is 95th Street, Pinewood Avenue Elementary, and in Exhibit B, Exhibit A, also Broad Avenue, and Hubert Howe Bancroft Middle School, Daniel Webster Middle School. Consent. Any questions on this item? Hearing none. Number 7, approve the definition of 4 outdoor learning environment projects and amend the facilities facilities plan to incorporate them. And this is on item number 7. This would be projects, they're in 95th Street Elementary, Charles Barrett Elementary, Langdon Avenue Elementary, Victory Boulevard Elementary, as described in Exhibit A with a budget of about $9.3 million. Consent.
I have a question.
Question. Item number 8, authorization to negotiate and execute an agreement with Granada Hills Charter for the synthetic track and turf field replacement project. Consent? Questions? Questions, okay. Item number 9, authorization to negotiate and execute an agreement with Palisades Charter High School for the Common Area Modernization Project.
Consent.
Question? Okay.
Question. Quick question.
Okay.
Consent, but question.
Okay. Item number 10, consideration of 2 business improvement district petitions. This would be to allow us to pay a small amount of money to these BIDs, business improvement districts, because our properties, some of our properties are incorporated in these business improvement districts.
Consent.
Consent with question.
Question, yeah.
Okay, item number 11, the instructional calendar. This will have a presentation. Not on consent. Okay, item number 12, second interim report and multi-year projections, and this is also will have a presentation. Discussion. Item number 13, home to school transportation reimbursement. This is money coming back to us, about $18.5 million, based on a formula at the state from the California Department of Education Transportation Services Plan. Consent, but a question from our student member. All right, and item 14 is a proposal to for a material revision for the city language immersion charter, sometimes referred to as CLIC, and it changes their governance from them to the new Los Angeles Charter School, and it revises their city language related to charter elements. Question, but is it on consent? Consent, but you have a question. Anybody else? Nobody else. Okay. Item number 15 is the Board of Education. Another one is a proposed material revision for the Los Angeles Charter. Recommends approval of this revision for them seeking a one-time administrative preference in spring 2023 for grades 6 and 7 students from their other program, The City, and an ongoing admission preference for matriculating grade 5 students from their charter, elementary charter, in an ongoing preference for matriculating 5th grades, also from CLIC, the one that they are taking over the governance of.
Public hearing.
That's a public hearing, exactly, so it can't be on consent. We'll just leave it that at public hearing. And item number 16, AALA, Associated Administrators of LA, have initial bargaining proposals for 2022. We just received those. Those don't have consent or non-consent. Okay, so we have now completed the consent items. We have all items but items 11, 12, 15, and 16 on consent. Now, we're going to have public comment. And we will take public comment on the items that are agenda items, because we keep the public comment at a particular time on general public comment at 4 o'clock.
Okay, so for public comment on tab 10, consideration of 2 business improvement districts, we have 6 speakers. Vera Padilla, are you here in person?
Thank you, Madam President.
Can I interrupt you just to move the mic down a little bit?
Yes,
So-
yes. Can
Perfect.
you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I'm a shorty, so hey. Thank you, Madam President, Honorable Jackie Goldberg. Thank you, esteemed school board members, Superintendent Carvalho, and Deputy Superintendent Salcido. I'm here on behalf of the bid, and I'm going to talk about some real fun stuff, the farmers market, educational and very helpful and healthy for our community. So I'm assistant manager at the farmers market, and we have worked with LAUSD students for the last 15 years, providing educational opportunities, eating healthy, providing healthy foods. We provide the SNAP program, and we also have distributed over $47,000 in market match. This means free money for our community of Lincoln Heights. They can shop at our market with that market match fund, with the market match funds. We also involve our students. We have had internship programs with our high school students. We've also worked with some of our students that are growing their own fruits and vegetables at Lincoln High School. And we also provide leadership and internship programs for our students. We have them come to the market, interview our community, interview the farmers, and then they write reports, and of course we provide a newsletter. We provide Christmas for our students, our farmers, our families. Over $75,000 we've given out to families for Christmas, Thanksgiving, every holiday you could think of, to provide toys for our children and also bags with fruits and vegetables for our needy. I think I've mentioned all of them. Internship programs for our youth. We involve our youth. We have our students that walk from Lincoln High School, Gates Elementary, all the elementary schools that surround the area where we're located. And they ask questions, they come in and talk to the farmers. So it's a real learning experience for our students in Lincoln Heights. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Misty Uwatsu, are you here? Misty, come on up, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Be sure to adjust the microphone so that we can
I
hear
think
your
I'm
words.
even shorter than Vera. So thank you, Madam President, Honorable Goldberg. Thank you, esteemed school board members, Superintendent Carvalho, and Deputy Superintendent Salcedo. So the Lincoln Heights Business Improvement District spends approximately $410,000 per year providing a clean environment for LAUSD students and their families. This includes street sweeping and approximately 250,000 pounds of trash removal, or the size of 2 blue whales, picked up every year. We also remove graffiti, tags, bulky items, and keeping the sidewalk clean and walkable for LAUSD students, families within the BID district. The Lincoln Heights Business Improvement District Safe Team protects almost 13,000 hours per year to ensure LAUSD families and students are safe before, during, and after school within the BID boundaries by providing a clean and safe environment to walk freely on the streets. And I want to let you know about what happened in a BID that I run. So a clean team heard a scream and went to investigate. A female LAUSD student was walking down an alley. When they went to investigate what happened, she was holding onto the fence and somebody was trying to take her. So our clean team went to her rescue, chased off the guy, saved the girl from being taken. And and she was walking on her way to the middle school in Highland Park. So that's one of the reasons why business improvement districts are so vitally important to the safety and health of LAUSD students. Thank you.
Thank you. Juana Lambert, are you here? Juana Lambert.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the board, all members of the board. I've been in the Boys and Girls Club for many years and watched you many times on Channel 58, but I have to admit this is my first time to be here, which I probably shouldn't admit that, but this first time in person. I am here in support of the bid. I'm with the Los Angeles Boys and Girls Club, and we are in Lincoln Heights and have been there since 1950. And of course, many of our students are your students. Many of our members are your students. Recently, we had a full house while you were negotiating your resolution for your, with your teachers or with your staff, and we had many, many kids that came to the Boys and Girls Club. So they had a safe place to go while you were negotiating your resolution. I think we've all worked together as Boys and Girls Clubs with schools. We pick up at 29 different schools to bring kids to the Boys and Girls Club so they can be safe after school. And so once again, we're here to support the bid because the partnership between schools, after-school programs, and the community is all about keeping communities safe for children. And that's why I'm here. We would like to see all of us work together to keep our community safe. And we appreciate what you do. And thank you so much for what you do. And we appreciate what you do and your support for the bid because we need all of us to work together. And you know we have had recent issues in Lincoln Heights, so it's more important than ever that we work together for the safety of our kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Flavio Olivas, are you here? Flavio, come on up. You have 3 minutes to speak once you begin.
Good morning, Madam President, all the board members. Thank you for having us. So just real quickly, so we've been in the community for since 1974. So we've been in the community for 49 years. That's my father, my mother. My sister was actually kind of raised inside my parents' business. We are active members of the community and physically see the continual work in progress of our property taxes at work. We protect our community with our own private security and cleanup crew, with our nonprofit, which is Chrysalis, which employs men and women with a reentry program for those individuals to come back into society. There has been an uptick in violence and graffiti in the city of Lincoln Heights, in which our security and our cleanup crew are on top of it every single day. We are very proud of Lincoln Heights and the Lincoln Heights Benefit Association, the Business Improvement District, and what it is that we provide for our community, for our children, for our kids. I'm very passionate about this because I've been there forever. I'm 40-something, right? And we've been there for 49 years. So there goes to show you something. Our program provides protection for the 8 educational LAUSD institutions within our LHBA BID districts. Please help us protect our kids, our properties, keep it clean, and keep it safe. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Lou Ruiz, are you here? Come on up. You'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Thank you for allowing me to be here and speak. I have been a merchant and participant in Lincoln Heights for almost as long as Flavio, believe it or not. Being a part of Lincoln Heights has been amazing. I've seen the ups, I've seen the downs. I would like to share with you that The smallest gift is worth more than the greatest of all intentions. The impact that the bid has had in the community. Sometimes you can give a gift and you will never truly know the impact that it will bring. But take it away and you know for sure that nothing good is going to happen. This bid I have seen on a daily basis as my office is there. I go every day. I'm inspired because the streets are being cleaned. I see graffiti in the morning, but I don't see it at night. I see every day everyone who is working on that bid, up and down that ball, cleaning everything up. I see my tax dollars at work. So much so that that small gift has inspired me to continue to invest in Lincoln Heights. I could have invested elsewhere. I come back and I pay to be there. And I will continue to invest in Lincoln Heights because it makes sense. That small gift of seeing the bid, people cleaning, community members, it has inspired me. I want you to imagine that every day that your students, our students, walk down Broadway, whether they're going to Lincoln High School or one of the grammar schools. They see their streets cleaned. They see that graffiti being taken away. They are inspired because they realize we matter. Lincoln Heights as a community matters. And you, every day, inspire our students. And that added little gift of the bid gives them that satisfaction of knowing we are important. And to that, you do that every day. But I would respectfully request that you participate in the bid with us, because that would be that added little gift that tells them you are important. And who knows where that gift that you give to them will take them to make our community bigger. I would ask that a great community grows when old men plant trees, but the shade of which they were never sit under. That's what this bid is. It's a request from an old guy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Steve Caston, are you here? Come on up, Steve Caston. You'll have.
This is an individual who needs no introduction in Lincoln Heights.
Thank you. Yes, Madam President and members of the board and the superintendent, I'm pleased to be here today and thank you for listening to us. Again, my name is Steve Casson. I'm the president of the Lincoln Heights bid as a volunteer. None of us on the board get paid. We're all volunteers. One paid person, our executive director. So the funds are used fiscally. We're fiscally responsible, I guarantee you. I've been a business person on North Broadway in Lincoln Heights for over 40 years at 2718 North Broadway. I've been a volunteer at Lincoln High School. I've addressed the students there, and we have a connection, a real connection. We want our students to go to school and graduate from school. You might want to know that one time I'm ad-libbing a little bit, but I spoke at Career Day at Lincoln High, and I remember a student looking at me and saying, "What kind of car do you drive?" And he says, "Do you have a swimming pool?" This is a true story. I said, "Yes." Of course, I was dressed in a suit. He said, "How do I get there?" Good question. Get an education. So we're really connected to these schools through our community. Again, we have a volunteer board. We have one paid person, our executive director. And when I talk about our community with the schools, the phrase, "it takes a village," it applies here today for sure. During COVID and the downturn in business over the last several years, we've been struggling to stay in business, as many of our neighbors are. If you drive down Broadway in our business, you'll see a lot of vacant storefronts. We can't allow that to continue. COVID's over. Let's get back to work. So our students and others in Lincoln Heights are in constant danger You've seen the shootings in our community. They're real. The bid renewal is essential. After almost 15 years of having a bid in Lincoln Heights, we have helped to keep our students and others safe. The bid is our safety net for so many. We ask you to endorse the renewal of the board of the bid, Business Improvement District. The bid is a lifeline for our businesses. If businesses fail, the community fails. So please vote yes to support the bid and our community. We really need your help. We need this as a partnership. With the board's vote and our property owners' vote, we can renew the bid for 10 more years. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say, not for purpose of discussion, but so that people understand what a business improvement district is, it is a voluntary self-tax. This is beyond the normal property taxes that they pay. They choose, they vote to tax themselves in order to form a business improvement district to provide the types of services we've heard about. Everybody or every agency or every school district that has property in that must also agree. And so the matter before us today is whether or not we agree to participate in the bid. I just wanted to let everybody know, because not everybody knows what a bid is. It's not bidding on a racehorse or something. It's a business improvement district. So thank you very much. Item number 12?
12 is not on consent, so we're going to finish the consent
I'm
calendar.
sorry. Thank you.
So item number 14, we have 7 speakers for item number 14. Frank Navarro, are you on the line? Frank Navarro, if you're on the line, press *6 to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Frank Navarro. All right, you're not there, Frank. Maria Gabrielle, are you here in person? Maria Gabrielle. Carmen Loera, are you here in person or on the line? Carmen Loera. Okay. Robert Vadana, are you here in person? Robert Vadana? No, Robert. Keith Delaquila, are you on the line? Keith Delaquila, also not on the line. Justine Gonzalez, also not on the line. I want to note that I do have callers on the line for both general public comment and other tabs. So folks are able to call in. It just looks like these folks have not. David Richardson, also not on the line. 1 second. All right, so we're actually going to go to tab 15 if it's okay with the board to put it on consent as opposed to discussion.
Is there any objection to putting it on consent? We're going to have the public hearing now, but is there any objection to putting it on consent? Seeing none, we'll call that a consent item, and we'll let you hear the public hearing now instead of waiting till 4 o'clock.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to do tab 15. I'm going to read the public hearing statement. This constitutes a public hearing for new Los Angeles Immersion Charter. A maximum of 12 individuals who wish to address the board on this item will be heard. Those who wish to speak should sign up at board meetings online. Speakers will be called by name. Okay, so under tab 15, we have Brooke Rios. Are you here? Brooke, if you're here, come on up, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Just make sure to adjust the microphone so we don't lose you.
Good afternoon, Madam President Goldberg, LAUSD board members, and Superintendent Carvalho. My name is Dr. Brooke Rios, and I'm the Executive Director at New Los Angeles Charter Schools. And I simply wanted to thank you for your consideration today and let you know that I'm here to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Matt Albert. Are you on the line? Matt Albert. Not on the line. Kate O'Brien. Kate O'Brien, are you on the line? Not on the line. Chotil Lira, are you on the line? Sochil Lira, are you on the line? Sochil Lira. Sylvia Barragan, are you on the line? Sylvia. Gabe Brayton. I have a feeling there may have been an idea to not call in since it's on consent. I'll just keep going, though. I do not want to skip anybody. Gabe Brayton, are you on the line? Gabe Brayton. Jenna Rosenberg. Barry Sherman. Jonathan Lopez. Alan Michael Graves. Steve Barrett. And Terrence Wright. Okay, that concludes tab 15. Just by way of explanation, everything that is not on the consent calendar, we will hear speakers to those public items when they are addressed in the discussion phase later on in the meeting. I don't want you to think that if you signed up for tabs 11 or 12, that we are skipping you. You will be heard when those items are heard individually in front of the board, as opposed to being on the consent calendar. And also, we're going to see the presentations for these three items prior to the questions and comments from that particular item from board members.
Yes, because normally now I would take a vote on the consent and hear the questions as we go through each of the items, but instead we're going to take a couple of them out of order before we do the consent vote because they're presentations. So for example, on item number 3, there's an update presentation on the phase 3 of the drinking water quality program. So we'll have that now, please. And we have Mr. Hovatter coming forward to do so. Thank you, sir.
Mark Hovatter, Chief Facility Executive. We're going to talk about our drinking water now, and I think it's one of the items that's most misunderstood with the district. Our superintendent still gets letters from constituents and students that say, we've got to do something about this terrible drinking water. It hasn't been tested. It's not safe. We've had students ask principals to bring in bottled water, the disposable bottled water. Today, hopefully the message you'll get from my presentation is our water is safe and it has been tested. We have actually led the way with water. There was a period, 15 years or so ago where we got a lot of attention and we had some fountains that were only safe when we flushed them. And we had high expectations we would do that every day, and we weren't doing a good job of that. But we are well past that because all of our fountains now are safe without flushing. When we first tested our water, the accepted standard was 20 parts per billion of lead in the drinking water. We established a standard of 15 parts per billion, which was then above the standard that was required. We tested all of our fountains, and we basically did 2 tests. The first test was just test them cold after a weekend period, and then we flushed them, let them run for 30 seconds, and tested them again. The idea being, could they be brought within a safe standard if you let it run for 30 seconds? And that was the genesis of the flushing program. Everything that didn't test less than 15 parts at the time, we took out of service. We had 60,000 fountains at the time. Code requires us to have about 25% of that, 15,000. But we had a lot of fountains, and the idea was let's put them everywhere and people will drink. One of the challenges with that is there's good places to put fountains and bad places. If you connect a fountain to a 1-inch line or something that's in the middle of the stream, water's always flowing through that pipe, it generally tastes good. But if you put it at the end of a line, like in the far corners of a playground someplace, the water's always stale. And while it's coming from the same source, it's been sitting there and it doesn't circulate, it tastes bad, people don't drink out of it, it's usually hot. But we had many more fountains than we had, and our focus was going to be, let's get quality, not quantity. No one's drinking out of those fountains anyway, so let's reduce them. We just have to maintain them, we have to test them. And the focus was on the fountains that we had. So we had some fountains that exceeded 15 parts, we took them out, and then we had about 19% of all our fountains didn't test less than 15 parts unless we flushed them for 30 seconds. So we, in an abundance of caution, and we always try to be extra cautious when we're talking about exposing kids to harmful things like lead in their water, we said we'll flush every single one of our fountains. And we did for about 20 years. And sometimes we didn't get every single one done, and we required principals to certify that they'd all been flushed, and we beat them up when they didn't certify them. Even though it was 19% of the fountains, we still flushed every one. We made them fill out paperwork. And we decided that we would get ourselves off the flushing program, and then even above and beyond that, we decided we're going to go to 5 parts per billion. It hasn't been mandated now. There's always discussion every year that we should be at 5 parts. 5 parts, by the way, is the same standard that those plastic bottled water have to live up to for the flushing. So we started with phase 1. In 2008, we went out and tested every single fountain. Remember, I said we had 60,000 fountains at the time, so that was a lot of testing, and it cost us a little under $3 million to do that testing. So people ask, why don't you do the testing every week? It's an extensive effort to go through testing all of the fountains that we had. And then in 2019, the board appropriated $12.5 million for us to start our program phase 1. We focused on the earliest education centers. The early ed centers, and we were going to address each of those because they're the most vulnerable children. At the time, I was the director of maintenance and operations, and our thought was, let's put filters on everything. We need to filter. The reality is our water gets filtered 3 times before it ever comes to us. It's 5 parts per billion or less before it gets to our meter. It's just if our plumbing messes it up that we have the problem. So people ask if it's filtered. Yes, it is. DWP or other water companies filter it 3 times. But we still thought, my thought as an M&O director was, let's put a filter on it. Today it's lead, tomorrow who knows what it's going to be, and we'll just build a better filter and we'll all be protected. That had some problems. We are still doing that for our early ed center because they're our youngest, most vulnerable, and everyone has filters, and we've completed that program now. But to filter water that's already at 5 parts per billion doesn't make any sense, and there are a lot of drawbacks to that. One, it costs money. The filters have to be changed, and generally a standard filter would only last 2 or 3 months. We got the companies to make a big giant filter that only has to be changed once a year, but it still has to be changed, and that's usually our custodial staff, which are already overworked, and that's an additional thing they have to do. It costs money. It creates a hazardous waste stream because now we've got all those contaminants consolidated in one place. And then we got beat up by the Dental Association because a lot of kids' only exposure to fluoride is through our water, and we're filtering it out. So we decided we would only do filters if it was necessary, but for the most part, we're going to get all of our fountains that have less than 5 parts per billion without doing the filtering. That was phase 1. Phase 2, we'd gotten everything to less than 15 parts per billion if you flush for 30 seconds. But we didn't want to be in the flushing business anymore. So we made a concentrated effort. The board approved $19.8 million. And over the course of the next 3 years, we made sure every fountain on our district is less than 15 parts. Every fountain remains under our district less than 15 parts per billion, which is considered safe drinking water. So we have no fountains that have not been tested. We have no fountains that are more than 15 parts, even if you don't flush. And we celebrated, and there were a lot of principals who were very happy they didn't have to certify that they were getting tested again. But before we could pat ourselves on the back, we decided we need to do a phase 3. So Right after we got it certified, we said, we're going to be less than 5 parts, every fountain, without doing the flushing, and we won't have to worry about that. This included, we had starter money of $15 million, and we knew that wouldn't cover everything, but we didn't know what the extent was because we hadn't done some extensive testing on every single fountain. The first $4 million we spent was to test every single fountain that we had in our service. Anything that was above the 15 parts is out of service. We've learned that already 77% of our fountains are less than 5. So today, there's a 3 out of 4 chance if you get a drink out of our water that it's better quality than the plastic bottle that you're going to buy. So our focus is on dealing with that last 25%. It's safe, it's less than 15, but it doesn't meet our new goal of being less than 5. So that's what the action today is going to come forward to get some more money so we can address that. All of our elementary school, all of our primary centers are done, and they have filters. We've got a good start, about 180 of our elementaries. This will allow us to finish the rest of our elementaries, and then our secondary school will start. One of the things that we're doing with our program, I mentioned quality, not quantity. So we may have a typical high school will have 40-something fountains. They don't need that many. If there's 7 of them that don't meet our standard of less than 5, we're going to take them out of service. And then we are going to put in water fill stations, not 7, but a few, 3 water fill stations. So now they can fill up their water so they'll have it available for them. And we will take the old fountains, which I call the dead silhouette, dead drinking fountain silhouette, and nothing screams, incompetent M&O more than a drinking fountain that's got a plastic bag over it. So we're going to make it go away. So some of the costs seem pretty high, but understand it includes taking it out of the wall, retiling, restuckling, doing whatever we need to do so it doesn't look like it's just an afterthought and an extra fountain that's there. So we're moving with that forward with this program. To date, we have 37,000 of our fountains that we've had, down from the 60,000 that we had when we started. And we've taken a lot of them out of service, and no one misses them. When we finish our program, with the money that will be allocated today, if the board approves this, we'll have every single elementary school, will be 100%. Any fountain you drink out of will have the same water quality as those disposable plastic bottles that we have. And then on average for the high schools, 2/3 of them will, 3/4 will, and then the 1/4 that doesn't, that will come with the next phase we have, but it's still less than 15 parts that we have. All the early ed centers, the 83 elementaries, I said we'd had more before, but this will allow us to finish all of those. So approved today, there's 461 elementary schools that will be 100% less than 5 parts for this. With that, I'll just leave the comment that it is safe to drink our water. Tell a friend. It has been tested, and for the most part, it's better than the bottled water, and soon enough, every single fountain we have will be better than the bottled water. With that, I would open up to any questions.
Yes. Well, thank you for that presentation. That was very thorough in taking us through the steps, and I'm very glad that the district is going, to 5, right? 5 ppb
parts per billion.
Part per minute, right. So my question is, the expense of, keeping up with the standards. Apart from bond funds, are there other grants that can help subsidize the work from California water boards apart from this?
There have been. The state has allocated some money. If they pass a law that requires us to get less than 5, there might be additional money that's there, but we've capitalized where we can. There's also the ongoing testing. Because it's less than 5 parts now, we still want to be diligent to do sampling. And the state has provided money. In fact, they've tasked the water purveyors to assist us with that, and we've got an aggressive sampling program. So while we don't do 100% testing, if we found one school that had more than one fountain that looked like it was problematic, then we would go into that school and test every one of the fountains until we found the problem.
I did see that in 2020 we did receive $640,000 from the grant from the California State Board.
That's correct.
How were these funds applied? Apart, we had bond money, but this money from
it just supplemented we had, and it meant we got to do a few more of the earlier centers. We applied them. Our priority was youngest first because they're the most vulnerable.
Great, thanks. And have you had keeping up with these standards, have them been challenging, or it just seems like you were on top of everything, but do you foresee any further challenges coming up ahead?
Our biggest challenge is we can't do everything at once, and the high schools all want to do those. Understand that every time we touch a fountain, whether it's through our American with Disability upgrades, we put in water fill stations. If we do a construction project, any of our major mods, we put in the drinking fountains. So some of them are being put in. We still have groups, volunteer groups that want to come in and donate money, and we always accommodate those. Most of them want to put chilled water and filtered water. Every one of our fountains that we install, even if we're not putting a filter on, they're filter capable. So as we plumb them, if there's some new threat that comes up or conditions change, we can put a filter. We do not chill our water. That's electricity that you got to bring to the site that drives up the cost, that's more maintenance. And if the intent is to fill up a water bottle, it's only going to be chilled for 10 or 15 minutes, then it's room temperature. So we haven't done that. We have had some private groups that insist on making that, and we've accommodated those, but every one we do, that's one more maintenance element that we have to consider.
And then just for your expertise or your experience, do you feel you have clear protocols and information on from the state on how to proceed with this? It's clear?
We do, and we're exceeding the state's requirements. We're exceeding, the best of my knowledge, will be the first major school district that will be less than 5 parts per billion as we move forward.
Hopefully that won't be detrimental to us since we're ahead of the game.
It is possible. That's a risk. It might be that we could have collected money for stuff, but we will have had our water safer or to the new safe standards before anyone else, and that's the benefit we had. It was a priority for us, and if the board supports that, we'll continue with this program.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Hovetter. I know that it's a concern for a lot of students. I remember, like in elementary school, we'd have like a class monitor who, during the Pledge of Allegiance, would flush the fountains. But I know that right now we have the Know Your Air network, where we've got these air sensors at different school sites, and so you can go online and parents can see the live air quality at a school site or in the community. I'm wondering, since you have such a rigorous water quality testing program, if it's something you think the public would value, is posting that information online in a way like the Know Your Air network?
Absolutely, and we had a system, but due to recent events, we're upgrading that system, so it's not available now. We do have the Office of Environmental Health and Safety helps us monitor, and if there's something that for some reason temporarily goes above, then they'll send notifications to all of the parents that we have. If there's a water breakage or something of that nature we have, but hopefully very soon we'll have that system back up and you can go look at which fountains. We tagged them out by fountain, so you can pick your favorite fountain to drink out of.
Thank you.
Yes, not a question, but a comment. I really appreciate the concern that you take in this water fountain concern with our schools, but this is only a teeny part of what Mr. Hovetter does every single day for all of our schools, and I know it personally. All facilities issues, health and safety issues, you just tell him, and he's on it. And I'm just so proud of Mr. Hovetter, of all that he does. People don't even know, but I know all the wonderful things you do for our kids, so thank you so much.
Yeah, first, let me second Mr. Schmerlson's observations about Mr. Hovetter. He's an amazing individual, and he served us for so long. But my question is, can we have a list of schools that will be served by this phase within the district?
Yes, sir, and it will be every elementary, and we'll list those out.
We have them by board, we have them by board district?
We do have that broken out, and we'll make sure that you have that available.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Hovetter. I was wondering if you could, after this presentation, provide the list of elementary schools that have where the work has already been completed. I think you said 83 schools were included, but the list that was shared is only early education centers.
Yes, we'll provide those 83 that are done, and then the remaining ones broken out by school board district.
And then for the remaining elementary schools, could you just speak to what's the timeline for the work to be completed, and will there be a prioritization for which elementary schools would be serviced first?
Right now, the timeline is too long, so I don't want to say it, but I can tell you that we're working on a program. It's a 3-year anticipated at our current rate. That's not good enough. We're going to do something to accelerate that. If there is a particular school that any of the board members have that we believe, for whatever reasons, needs to go at the top of the list, we need to do them all, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can.
Well, maybe focusing on our focus schools or
Yes,
schools serving high needs communities.
Our intent, there's 100 schools that we know are going to be on the top of the list in each case, and then from there it will be as we get to them. Well, I don't know that I don't know that it matters if we change that order one way or the other. We're just going to get them done as quickly as we can.
This item will be voted on when we get to the consent calendar, but there are no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Hovatter. Next presentation is for, it's on discussion, so I'm not going to do either of those yet. I think that's it.
We have questions on
Oh, yes, I have other questions on consent calendar. On item number 4, Dr. Rivas, you had something on cowl-shaped ventilation.
I remember reading in the board informative that there were some schools that didn't make the cut, that didn't make the 4 categories, and I was just wondering what are the plans in place to address the ventilation needs of these schools that were denied, or what they were specifically denied for?
Thank you for asking that question. Essentially, this is a program that we can commit $4.8 million, and we're going to get someone else's money to pay $26.4 for things that we need to do to every one of our air conditioning. No HVAC unit will be left without the repairs or systems they need. This is just a funding mechanism that's going to help us pay for some of them. In fact, it will be easier to pay for the others because we got someone else that's helping us through this grant.
That's it.
Okay, next item, I have an item number 5. I have Ms. Ortiz-Franklin.
Yeah, you can stay right there, Mr. Hovatter. We have 2 items on the agenda related to outdoor projects, and then we also have nature explorers. I was just hoping you could share for us and the public the difference between SEEDS, nature explorers, and these other outdoor learning projects, because the costs seem to vary. I wonder what the outcome is for kids, and also the partner piece.
Yeah. We have several different greening initiatives. We've got the SEEDS program, which is an augmentation grant for people that want to come in and do a volunteer garden. Then we've got some state-funded, and then we've got other programs ourselves coming up later in the agenda for additional schools. The SEEDS program was created because at one point, facilities was seen as the obstacle to greening on the schools. We have a lot of rules and red tape, and people would get excited about a project, and they would have an architect design it, and then they would come tell us about it after they're ready to come in and start, and we would say, yeah, but you have to do these things. In particular, the biggest challenges when we had the volunteer gardens, people didn't anticipate that there might not be water where you want to put your garden, and that ends up being an expense that you have to bring in. They didn't understand that we have to test all the soil, because when we put pavement down, we put things down to stop weeds from growing, and we, in many instances, take the soil away and bring in good soil that's suitable for growing. And then we have to do ADA compliance. So what we did was create an augmentation grant that said, let us make the garden ready, you just focus on coming in and planting it. And that was the $100,000 that we created. Recently, in the last several months, we recognized that a lot of the SEEDS money were going to areas where they had the most volunteers that do gardening already. So it's disproportionate. And while we didn't just divide it by 7 or 4, we wanted to do something that would encourage people in other areas that don't normally have gardens. So we created a $150,000 grant instead of the $100,000 grant. And the idea being we would take the extra $50,000 and that would buy the planting materials and the things that normally don't get donated in other areas. So it's the 150th schools with the worst greening index get $150,000. The program's been very effective for us. Even though the 4 we have today are all the $100,000 grants, we've had 49 projects that have been submitted. The schools that make up the 150 worst scores are 17% of all of our schools, and 33% of all of the grants or all of the applications that have been submitted have been from schools that qualify for the 150. So essentially, we're getting twice the number based on the number of representation. So it's doing exactly what we wanted that to. It's bringing more projects to the underserved areas that have the lowest scores on their greening.
So this one, the SEEDS project, is the schools applying of their own volition, and potentially they have a partner, or they themselves are partners, because the ones that are coming before us today, they're the partners.
It is an augmentation grant, but sometimes the school themselves become that. And the commitment from the group that volunteers is the initial planting and the maintenance. So we don't want to install something and then goes bad, so we look for a long-term agreement that will help us keep it in good shape so it doesn't become a weed patch.
Okay, and then the schools that can get the 150, I think this board would want them to be further ahead and have more of those available. What supports do we provide for schools to apply for this?
We have a list of people that like to do volunteer projects, and we connect them with those partners. We have trailers that we fill up full of wheelbarrows and hoses and hose and those sort of things, and we'll drop it off so they don't even have to have their own tools when they come in and do it. We'll provide to them. We even have a landscape architect that we've hired that will design that for them, so he'll sit down with those concepts. So all these steps we've done to try to equalize it so those that aren't in a community that's flooded with master gardeners to help them still have that ability. Even if they've never planted anything in their life, we'll bring the right people in that will help them on how to do their planting days.
Thank you. Some similar questions to Board Member Ortiz-Franklin. Just wondering, what are we doing in terms of the application process to ensure that there's intentional equity in the SEEDS grant?
The good news is we haven't turned anyone down. At some point, we're going to run out of money, and we will ask the board to allow us to supplement that, so everyone that submits it that qualifies. The challenge for equity is to get people to come to the table to offer those. So that's why we've created these extra steps. We've got the architect, we've got the tools, we've got the instruction, we've got the extra money to buy the plants in the areas that are underserved. And where before they were underserved and less than 17% were going to these schools, now 33% of all of them are coming in. So those efforts have been pretty effective so far. It doesn't mean that we still can't do more.
Yeah, it's great to hear that progress has been made and we're helping to address areas where there aren't partner organizations in the same way as other less underserved areas of our community. I just wonder whether more intentional outreach might be helpful so that principals are aware that I've spoken to principals in my district who weren't aware that this grant opportunity existed, and for those that may be grappling with other challenges at their school site, this might be kind of the last thing on their minds, and so some intentional outreach might be helpful.
Yes.
I was also wondering about how much you referenced the funds potentially being exhausted at a certain point. Can you speak to how much money is left in the SEEDS bucket?
I'm sure I've got it here someplace, but I think we're less than halfway through the $5 million now. With the 49 projects coming in, there'll still be a little bit more room, but by that point, before we get down to $1 million left, we're going to come back to the board and ask to supplement it. This is one of our most popular programs. I think it's one of the biggest bang for the bucks that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I'm eager to re-up it, certainly, and wonder whether we might also think about, looking to those 150 schools most in need of greening, whether it might make sense to consider reserving some of the funds so that they specifically can tap into this amount of money.
We will make sure that anyone in those top 50 will get that grant first.
Thanks for your time.
I had that same question, how much more money was left in SEEDS, but you answered that. Thank you.
6, I think I'm the only one with a question on that, and it actually isn't a question. I've noticed that we've got these ADA situations, and I know that they have to be high-ranked in the need, and they have to have students that need it to get to the top of the list. But I'm wondering about simpler things, like, for example, at 28th Street Elementary, there's no ramp to get into the school. So they don't need everything done. They need a little thing done, but it's really important because I saw people try to get in with, wheelchairs, and that's not so easy with 4 stairs to go up. So how do we deal with the small ones that don't need a complete ADA done?
We have 3 projects. We're committed to do the big project for every one of the schools. Ultimately, we'll get through every schools, but there are some schools that have an immediate need. So we have a smaller program. It's called the Rapid Action. And maybe it's one teacher or one student that gets hurt, and we just have to put a ramp into one individual classroom. So the board has delegated us authority to do those smaller type projects. And then we've got the in-between the $10 million projects and the $150,000 project. And even in today's report, we have 3 of the big projects you'll see that are in the teens, and then there are 2 smaller ones that are $2 and $4 million each. That's the in-between, and we'll bring those out of cycle because there's an immediate need. So if there's not the immediate need, then it'll wait its turn as we go through our transition plan.
So as we
we've
visit
approved.
schools and we see one of these little needs, we should just let your office know about it?
We do, and in particular, Ken Harrington's sitting in the balcony behind me. His ears are perking up now, and
28th Street.
he'll be out there the next day taking a look at it.
That they're into the school that didn't have stairs.
Yes.
And I thought that was just not, for everybody, it wasn't accessible. Okay, nobody else on 6? That takes care of 6. On 7, we had Ms. Gomez again.
Yes, to piggyback off of some of my other comments on the seats item, obviously really excited to see these projects and thank our voters for their support of our schools. And I'm excited to see Langton Elementary, which is really high on our greening index, as well as Victory Boulevard in my district, receive these funds. I was wondering if you could help clarify how these projects will contribute to the 30% greenscape to hardscape goal in the board resolution from September 2022.
They will contribute. Our goal is to get to 30%. Every time we do a paving project, we get to that 30%. These are not necessarily paving projects, they're bungalow removal projects. So it's a smaller footprint, so it's not, in many cases, it's not going to get us all the way to that 30%. It just addresses where that bungalow used to go, and instead of coming back and putting new pavement, we're putting a garden in it. So it's a step towards that, and obviously a big step because we're making that not just a greening project, but an outdoor classroom. It's going to have internet, it's going to have sinks, it's going to have the seating and those elements that are there. But when we do the pavement is when we get the 30%, when we'll pick up the 30% as we take pavement out and replace that.
Got it. Is it possible to share, I think I got what the initial ratio is of greenscape to hardscape. What will the new ratios be at these schools with this investment?
At these schools, we'll have to calculate that out.
And maybe it's worth considering, you know, I think what I have experienced is that it's unlikely for schools to get multiple large bond investments in a short time span. So if this is our main effort to green schools, especially our elementary campuses, maybe it's worth considering whether a larger investment is merited to get us to that 30%. If this is the one bite at the apple, what do we need to do in order to achieve that goal?
That is a good point. We have multiple programs that we have. There are 20 schools that are going to fall under this program. We brought 5 at a prior board meeting. This is 4, so we're almost halfway there. The other 11 will be coming in the following months. They've already been named. All 20 of those are in the top 35 of the greening index. The ones that the 15 that we're skipping over, because this is a bungalow removal project, either they don't have a bungalow at this time that we can remove, or that there's another project that's already coming in that's going to accomplish that. But we've got 4 or 5 different programs, not counting the volunteer efforts where other partners want to come in and do that, and all of those are taken into consideration. Our highest priority in each instance is going to be we're going to go to the greening index first, and if the greening index hasn't got to their 30% yet, then they'll still be at the top of the list, even though they've already had a project.
Okay, happy to hear it. And again, really appreciate the work. I know how hard it is for some of our schools that are very low in terms of greening to be able to reach that 30%. So I don't want us to miss an opportunity similar to what we do with comp mods. If we're going to be doing extensive construction on a site, let's go ahead and green at that time.
Yes.
Thank you.
I do need to point out that we said 30% for every school. We will have some schools that's just not practical to get to that 30% just because of configuration. But obviously we'll average over 30%, but there might be some schools that we'll have to look at green walls or something else to get the greening there.
Okay, I've asked also that they put the number of the rating number on the projects in the future when we have them so that people can see them, because, for example, 95th Street is number 14, and Barrett Elementary is number 11. So I've just asked them in the future so that they can see, we can see where they are in the scale by looking at the numbers. Okay, nobody else on 7? Oh, no, that was, yeah, 7. Okay, on 8, we have Dr. McKenna.
Yes, this is about executing an agreement with Granada Hills Charter for synthetic track. We're consenting to approve the synthetic track and turf field. Question, does this cost align with other projects of this scope? 1.5 million.
This is a little bit lower. I'm not sure what all their scope is. They have a synthetic track already, and they're just bringing this up to the current standards the Division of State Architect requires, so it's a little bit lower. If you're doing a brand new field, it would be more in the $4 and $5 million range. Replacement, it depends on why it failed. If there's subsurface areas, all of our synthetic fields, as crazy as it sounds, we put sprinklers in our plastic grass because it still heats up and it creates problems. Plus, it's a cleaning mechanism. There's no natural way for the fields to get cleaned. So this probably doesn't have those same scopes that we have. I need to point out that this is one of our charters. They have a sole occupancy, and they're paying for 100% of this, their own money. They paid for 100% of the original one that they installed, and then this is bringing it up to, it did not meet all the Division of State Architect standards, so this is going to accomplish that.
Thank you.
Don't go away, Dr. McKenna. You're up for number 9 as well.
And why am I so popular to myself?
I don't know. There you are.
This is another one. Mr. Palisades is paying for the project $500,000. This is my own observation. I could be very wrong about this. Seems like a low-cost projection for the scope of the work. What happens if the project costs more than the initial estimate?
This is 100% paid for by the charter themselves. They just have to have our approval because it's our property, so if it goes over, they're going to pay for that.
That was a quick answer. Good. Thank you. That's what we needed to know.
Okay, I believe we've had our questions on the 2 business improvement districts, but if anybody else needs Dr. McKenna or Dr. Rivas.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Roll now, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Over the course of this is for number 10. We're talking about number 10 now, Madam President. Over the course of the current term of the bid, how many times has the cost of membership increased? Or do you know that?
I don't know. I would have to look back through that history. I do know that because we're a school district, they negotiate with us, and we generally pay half the rate per square foot that everyone else does for this, and that's what we're getting in these 2 cases.
Are we able to receive extra observations and surveillance of campus perimeters by this bid?
Each bid has its own rules. For the one for Lincoln Heights, they have 24/7. They have security, and they spend their time proportionally on each of the areas. For the Arts District, it's 24/7. For the Lincoln Heights, it's 7 days, but I believe it's 16 hours that they'll do, and they proportion that out based on that. For the Lincoln Heights, 8% of all the footprint is our footprint, so we should get 8% of the time for that roving patrol.
And also, there's nothing that prevents us from requesting that they do it, particularly if there were certain events that were coming up that might create more traffic or so forth. So we would just contact the bid administrator and ask them if they could provide some additional help. And I've found that bids in general in the city of LA have been very accommodating to those requests. Anybody? Go ahead.
He's very knowledgeable. I have no questions.
Okay. Dr. Rivas, I think you had something on the business improvement districts.
Yes, I just had a question specifically for our presenters. The connection with the school, you mentioned you provide internships to our students. What is your communication with our schools and our high schools? Yeah, for your.
Lincoln High School with Leadership Academy.
Bring the mic down a little lower.
Oh, that's right, I'm a shorty. I was an educator. I taught at Lincoln High School for 28 years. Thank you, Scott, for training me. And I work with the EduCare program, the after-school program for those students that need additional credits and need to be involved. They do their community senior projects with us. I go twice a week and meet with the EduCare kids. There's 150 to 300 that meet after school. Train them to come out to our community and assist us at the farmer's market, any event that's taking place in Lincoln Heights. We go through leadership. We train them to be cordial and meet and greet all our constituents in Lincoln Heights. And also they have to do a project. They have to write their service learning project. The elementary schools, we visit them on a regular, again, the after-school project, get to meet the parents, get to meet the students, and we involve most, and I say the ones surrounding the Lincoln Heights area. I could name them off for you if you want. Glen Alta, Gates Elementary, Albion, Griffin, even Sacred Heart Elementary. We involve them in art projects. Every time we have an event, we do an art project, we select a winner, we give them a certificate. So we're getting ownership into the community by meeting with the parents and the students.
Thank you. And well, Lincoln Heights is my community, so I'm there on Broadway all the time. So my question is, how in terms of safe passages and working with our, the city with our own house, I just would really love to confirm that we're being as compassionate, that we're working with the city in terms of our own house.
Let's raise
So
that
that'd be
question
great.
with Mr. Hovatter. I'm not sure our rules allow a public speaker to answer them. It's just a rule issue, I'm sorry. So,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
your specific question was?
Go ahead. Ask it again, Dr. Rivas.
Well, in terms of safe passages, I know that they have safety officers patrolling, so I just want to make sure that we're working with the city in terms of working with our own house and providing services rather than just removing them because they're in the way. I just want to make sure that we're being compassionate in terms of that respect.
I can answer that one. It is part of the work that we're doing, especially as we're looking at implementing the citywide ordinance around our unhoused individuals that tend to impact some of our local schools. Of course, all of our approaches come from a compassionate lens, right? And so I think as we continue to work with them and identify, hot spots, it is a dual effort. Also thinking about what are the opportunities, especially with the business improvement district, to think about that broader net of safe passages where we collectively identify solutions for folks. It's not a solution that should solely be held by the district. It takes a community effort to do that.
I just know that safety officers probably work differently than other officers, so I just want to make sure we're being consistent with that. That's all.
Thank you. And Mr. Shin, I neglected to call on you for item 9. I apologize.
Sorry, Mr. Hovetter, I have a quick question for items 8 and 9. Just generally, when we're engaging with our charter partners on these construction projects that they're paying for, is it something we address with them when we're looking at the 30% target for reducing hardscaping and greenscape?
We did not make that a requirement for them when we created our use agreement. Obviously, there are areas that have those same concerns. The partners that we're talking about generally don't have that problem with that greening space, but we can certainly approach them.
Certainly not Palisades.
We can partner with them to let them know what available partnerships might have or any of our programs. But I believe they're all well on their way to the 30%.
Right. Thank you.
And now we'll go to item number 13, and we have you again, Mr. Shin.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So I think, let me pull it up, the report up right now, but I think when we're looking at the communities that were eligible for transportation services, it said because of distance and hazard. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you make the determination which students' walk routes to school are considered hazardous or dangerous, where they merit transportation services?
Good afternoon, Ken Hoke, Transportation Services Division. We have a routing team that determines that, and examples of hazards are through dangerous area where it's gang infested. Railroad tracks, for example, is considered dangerous. We also work with other offices within the district as well to advise us if there are any walk zones that are considered dangerous, and we apply that to our routing.
So if there's a student or a principal who has a concern that something along the route isn't safe, who in your division can they talk to about making that determination?
So those requests will probably come through the director's office or the deputy director, and if necessary, we would actually send one of our supervisors out to look at the area firsthand to see if anything can be done to mediate that. And if it's required, we can provide transportation.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Board Member Schmorlson.
Because you brought this up, I receive daily calls about homeless encampments, blocking sidewalks, where my kids cannot go to school. They have to walk in the street to go around them. We're talking about safety and danger. You mentioned railroad tracks. You mentioned gang infested. But what do we do? Because every time I call about this blocking of the sidewalk, well, it's a city problem. Yeah. Well, it's not a school problem. What does one do for safety?
So
I can answer that. So generally, if we have an incident, just like that's reported, we work with our operations team through Andres Chait and Dr. Webb to make sure that is a identified site for city assistance, and we then work with the city to identify a solution there. And so we are tracking situations in which there's impacted safe passages with students, especially when it comes to pickup or drop off. And then we report that to the city, and then we track that there's actually a closeout, that there's a proper follow-up to address those concerns.
Okay, I appreciate that. I will direct my calls to you, Mr. Salcido. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Way to go, Pedro. Okay, now we're up to item 14, Dr. Rivas.
What was it, 14?
14.
City language, yes, okay.
Click.
14. My questions was just, what are the reasons for city language closure? I know it's lower enrollment, but if you can expand a little bit more on that.
Good afternoon, board members and everyone, superintendent. Dr. Rivas, this school would remain open. They're just switching governance. However, their sister school is closing due to, frankly, low enrollment and other challenges. Now, the reason why they're also looking to have this charter school go under the new LA is because of similar issues, organizational concerns to sustain it for the long term. So in short, they looked at that, had those conversations, and then did their due diligence with New LA to have it subsumed. But the sister school, they have already approved a resolution to self-close June 30 of this year.
Yeah, I guess my questions are combined with 14 and 15. And how do we know that New LA won't be affected by the same challenges that's leading city languages closure?
It's a great question and part of what we look at. So we look at 4 big areas: academics, governance, finance, and operations. As the report notes, we feel they have a lot of strength in the latter 3 areas. Now, they have also shown some strength more recently with internal data at their middle school level with academics. However, there is room for growth. So when we looked at the whole picture, since this school was probably going to continue to exist under the city board, should the board not approve it, then we looked at it will come up for renewal in a couple of years and we'll continue to assess it. But we looked at all those factors and in the end ended up feeling that they're able to continue it. And they're adding additional resources to support their existing schools, because that's also a question. Not just taking on the new one, but keeping your existing schools progressing in the right way.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring this up because, well, first of all, I want to thank all the stakeholders who really worked hard in coming up with a solution that was affecting Baldwin Hill Elementary School community. But I think out of all of this, I think we know at least from my perspective, is that co-locations are negatively affecting both charter school and traditional our schools as our LAUSD schools as host neighborhood school. And charter schools are also grappling, as we are, with low enrollment and even closure. So I think this is something we really need to keep a close eye on because it's going to negatively affect a lot of our students and families in LA. So I just want to bring that up.
And I would hope that we would be talking with some of them about becoming affiliated charters, because I think that will stabilize at least some of them that are kind of rocky right now. I had a question on this one too as well, just briefly, which has to do with the closure of the school. Those assets and things, they will take care of paying off some of their debt, but the new group was also maybe responsible for paying some of their debt off. Is that correct?
Great question. We looked at that. So there are closure procedures for the city middle school. And our team has followed up. They will have a closure agent and fulfill those duties. At this point, they're the ones responsible to close that out. New LA, at this point, their agreement is that they're not assuming those. Certainly, if there's an issue, we'll deal with it down the line. But based on the current review, the city's board will fulfill that closure process.
And I hope one of the benchmarks is reclassification, since I believe last year they had 0 reclassifications.
That's one of the areas for one of the schools as noted. So
I've never seen 0 before.
we have on a few occasions, and we never want to see that. We don't have the data yet for this year for the state, so we can't discuss further, but we're monitoring closely.
We'll hope it's better.
Thank you.
All right, I think that concludes the questions on the consent calendar. A motion is now in order to adopt the consent calendar. Moved by Mr. Schmerelson, seconded by Ms. Gomez. Call the roll.
Okay, so I'm just going to say that we're voting on the consent calendar, items 1 through 10, and then items 13, 14, and 15. Dr. McKenna?
Yes.
Dr. Rivas?
Yes.
Mr. Schmerelson?
Yes.
Mr. Melvoin?
Yes.
Ms. Gomez?
I want to register a no vote on contract 191590123, the Provo Canyon High School for procurement actions, tab 1, and a no on tab 10, and I'm yes on the balance.
Noted. Ms. Ortiz-Franklin?
Yes.
Board President Goldberg?
Yes.
And Student Board Member Shin?
Yes.
Items, including those that you are sitting here in the front row for. Your item has now passed. Okay, there you go. So now we will go back to item number 11, the instructional calendar, and I believe we have the speakers on that. And we have a presentation.
Might we do the presentation?
Let's do the presentation before the speakers.
All right, while we queue up the PowerPoint, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today to present draft calendars for the next 3 school years for your review, consideration, and possibly approval. Just to kind of take us back a step, what we've done already this year as part of this process, you'll of course recall that we engaged in an extensive process of gathering stakeholder input, particularly with our LAUSD families. We did a survey where we received over 52,000 responses from our families. We also engaged in more targeted focus groups across all regions, where we met with families to get more in-depth feedback as to the calendar itself. We met with our labor partners. We, of course, engaged our internal district divisions to see if they had any feedback that we needed to consider. And, of course, our convening today marks our 3rd presentation at the board. We've done 2 presentations prior to this at Committee of the Whole, and now we're here today. Okay? Throughout that engagement, there were 2 key themes that really arose or came to the fore as we went through this. And those themes were around equity and alignment. And as we walk through the presentation, my hope is that those will become self-evident. So before we review the actual proposed calendars, I want to very briskly walk us through some summary information. So, of course, all 3 years of the proposed calendar cycle adoption feature 18 weeks in the first semester, which creates a greater balance between the fall and the spring. We know that's always been a challenge for the district, while also addressing PE requirements for our schools that are on a 4x4 schedule. We have, of course, confirmed that all holidays, unassigned days are included in the calendars. Now, as a reminder, unassigned days that are aligned with certain religious observances are not included when the observance in question falls on a weekend. Due to this established practice, only the last year of the 3-year cycle includes the 2 unassigned days associated with Jewish religious observances in the fall. The first 2 years of the proposed adoption only feature 1 unassigned day. All 3 years, of course, contain 180 instructional days, 2 pupil-free days. Thanksgiving break remains 1 week. The most significant shift from current practice in the proposed calendars, of course, is a shorter winter recess, with year 1 of the adoption including a 2.5-week winter break, and the last 2 years having a 2-week winter break. As we go through each year, when we get to year 1, I will go into greater detail as to why we have a 2.5-week break in year 1. As I referenced earlier, our engagement with stakeholders, particularly as part of our parent focus groups, really highlighted the 2 key themes around equity and alignment, but really I want to focus here on the equity piece. Our belief is that the calendars as proposed, including the shorter winter break, address key concerns elevated by many of our parent stakeholders and actually, I think, echoed by some of the comments received at the board during prior presentations. A shorter break will potentially mitigate the impact of any learning loss incurred during the winter vacation. We also know that our families have made it very clear that the city and the county, there's an existing infrastructure for summertime, summer camps, twilight programs, what have you. There isn't that same kind of built-in support in the community for winter break. Okay? This also gives us the opportunity, pivoting to summer, to potentially offer a longer summer session, more than what we have traditionally offered. And again, as I've referenced already, the proposed adoption clearly addresses the need raised by families around food and childcare for that 3rd week of winter break. And lastly, it promotes greater alignment to board goals by addressing the possible learning loss created by that longer winter recess. In terms of alignment, again, in previous presentations, we have highlighted that the district's extended winter break was something of an outlier when compared to most local and national school districts. The proposed calendar brings us into alignment with the established practice across most school districts of offering a 2-week winter break. This creates consistency for many of our families that may come into our district from other parts of the state or country. And for our employees, many of whom have school-age children, but they are not in LAUSD, maybe Glendale, Alhambra, what have you, it creates consistency for them as well. Okay, as we actually dive into the calendars themselves, I want to highlight some key dates for each year. So beginning, of course, with the 23-24 school year, the first day of school is Tuesday, August 15th, with the pupil-free day preceding it immediately on Monday the 14th. Winter recess begins on Wednesday, December 20th, and ends on Friday, January 5th. Our students and staff would return on Monday, January 8th, and the last day of school is Wednesday, June 5th. For 24-25, the first day of school is Monday, August 12th. The pupil-free day is Friday the 9th. Winter recess begins on Monday, December 23rd, ends on Friday, January 3rd. And students return on Monday, January the 6th, with the last day of school falling on Thursday, the 29th of May. And for the final year of the adoption, the first day of school is Monday, August 11th, with the pupil-free day on Friday the 8th. Winter recess beginning on Monday, December 22nd, ending on Friday, the 2nd of January. Students returning, of course, on Monday the 5th, and the last day of school being Friday, May 29th. Okay, so as promised, I want to spend a little bit of time on the first year of the adoption and really dive into why we have a 2.5-week winter break and why we're starting on a Tuesday rather than a Monday. So I want to start backwards with the length of the winter break. In our engagement with our stakeholders, when we did discuss a 2-week winter break specifically for next year, the big concern was that Christmas falls on that Monday. So folks would be off on Friday, Christmas is on Monday. We could certainly anticipate that that would maybe drive absenteeism up, either between or among, students or staff. So that certainly was an issue. While this is not a driving principle, in other words, I want to be clear, this is not why we are proposing this. This also gives us almost like a transitional year, where we have 1 year in the adoption, where we're kind of pivoting from a 3-week break to a 2.5-week break. So it does create a little bit of a cushion, if you will. So that's the why on the 2.5 week. Now, why a Tuesday rather than a Monday? I could almost, I know he's on Zoom with us, but I could almost hear Board Member Melvoin when I was putting Tuesday here and saying, why not Monday? So the first day is on a Tuesday rather than a Monday, because when we first looked at the coming year, we did have the school year starting on a Monday. And we had winter recess actually starting on Thursday, the 21st. When we put those two pieces into the equation, what it created was that the last day of school would have been Monday, June 3rd. I think any of us that have been at schools would know that if the last day of school is a Monday, that in effect, the last day of school would be a Friday, because many of our students would choose not to come. Many of our employees would also make that same decision for any number of reasons. So the thought was that if we started on a Tuesday, which, by the way, also has been historically a practice in many cases, starting on a Tuesday, adding that one more day to that 2.5-week winter break, ultimately what it creates is that the last day of school is Wednesday, June 5th. So the hope is that it kind of captures, for lack of a better term, our students and our staff to be engaged, because even though it's not a full week, it's not just a 1 day. So again, there is very much a method to our madness, if you will, on why we established the calendar the way we did. Okay, the next 2 years of the adoption, I think, are much more self-explanatory. These represent the full pivot to a 2-week winter break. So this is 24-25 that you'll see in front of you. And then 25-26, which also has a 2-week winter break. And again, I've already walked us through the key dates for each year. So with that, I thank you as always for your careful attention, and if I can be helpful with any questions, be more than happy to.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank Andres Chait and the staff who, in a very deliberate and considerate way, engaged in a process that included not only meetings with labor partners, surveys, online surveys with families, focus groups also with families and interested groups, and obviously having learned and listened carefully to the input of the board itself. The recommendation that's before you, multi-year recommendation, is one that, in addition to obviously providing a reduction of the potential for learning loss, which has been observed year after year as a result of that rather extensive winter break, it does provide for a more homogeneous alignment with practices, not necessarily of other districts across the state and the country, but quite frankly, the individual needs of many families in our community who may have children at different levels of education, including colleges and universities, that right now provide for a less than seamless, harmonious alignment of time of family, children, and adults. It should not be lost also, as we just wrapped up a series of negotiations with SEIU, that many classified employees will benefit, particularly the lowest wage earners in our district, will benefit from a shorter winter break, providing greater opportunity for continuity of work and obviously payroll. So for all the reasons, this is a set of solid recommendations I believe serve students well, serve employees well, and will go a long way in terms of better adapting to the needs of our families. Saying that, I recognize that anything ever goes without some degree of controversy, and any time that we have a change like this, some individuals will be inconvenienced. But if in fact we are to continue to look at these issues from a policy perspective through a lens of equity, this is the right move at the right time to benefit absolutely the right kids. Thank you very much.
Board Member Schmerson.
So I too agree. You did an excellent job with your staff on preparing this. I was not in agreement, but you convinced me by the presentation. I only have one question. Why would we ever do a survey and get the answers and then ignore them all? That's my only question. Really, don't do a survey next time. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Discuss it with your different groups first, go into details with people, but I guess it was a general survey, and I guess you wanted to have a feel, sort of, and you got the feel, and the feel was to keep the calendar. So my only suggestion would be you shouldn't do a survey and then throw away the results. But you have convinced me, so have you, Superintendent, for the new calendar. I was not in favor because just because of the initial survey and not obeying the will of the people. But thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Mr. Shen.
So thank you for your presentation, Mr. Chait. And I was looking sort of when this came before the board before in 2017, and I think it was rejected. And then the previous student board member back in 2017, she cited that a lot of students use winter break for AP prep and credit recovery programs and those sorts of things. So I'm kind of wondering, from 2017 until now, what sort of change is there in the decision making? Is it because we're approaching it from this new equity lens, or why bring it back now?
I think there's a couple of factors at play. One is, again, leaning in more into an equity lens for our decision making. I think that's first and foremost. I would also argue that compared to 2017, we have more schools that are on a 4x4 schedule, particularly at high school. Those schedules inherently provide more opportunities for credit recovery, AP prep as part of the day itself. So there isn't quite that same driving need to have an intersession available.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Ms. Gomez.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chait, for the helpful presentation. And I think it's great, and it's been a long time since we've adopted a multi-year calendar. So just speaking from the perspective of a mom with 3 young kids who has challenges balancing out all of those childcare demands, it's really helpful to provide this clarity for our families so many years in advance. So I appreciate staff's effort in doing that, as well as the equity lens. Just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions. If you could just explain, I think many of us as educators know why balancing the 2 semesters is important, but maybe you can explain for the public why that matters.
Sure. So there's 2 parts. One, in terms of content that can actually be delivered during each semester, right? So obviously, if it's a shorter window, if it's a shorter session, there's less content that you can actually provide. In our previous iterations of our calendars, we actually had instances where students would basically go on break and then come back and take finals or high-stakes exams, which would have obviously a significant impact on our students. On the one hand, you could posit, like maybe Mr. Shin said, that that's additional time for prep and studying, but in all candor, for many of our students, it also signified learning loss.
Absolutely. And then in terms of, an extended summer school offering, which I think is a really exciting prospect, when do you expect we would be able to provide more information about that to families and staff?
I think that would be a dialogue that we would have after spring break with our colleagues in Division of Instruction and with superintendent's leadership.
Fantastic. And then the last thing I just wanted to thank and say I'm grateful for the inclusion of April 24th as our unassigned day in recognition of the Armenian genocide, which I know is something that's critically important to so many families in the East San Fernando Valley. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gomez.
Anybody else? Dr. Rivas.
And have you presented this new calendar with the 2 weeks to our labor partners? And
No, it comes to the board for action.
And what if they are not in agreement and they want changes? Will we make any changes after that? If labor partners are...
To my knowledge, let me break up the question. One, we have had a process of engagement with our labor partners, so they have had an opportunity to weigh in. And again, to my knowledge, and I'll certainly defer to some of our more expert labor folks in the room, this isn't a process that goes through a negotiation in terms of the actual calendar itself. But I see Dr. Murphy with insight.
Oh, it's this one, sorry. So the actual number of work days is not changing. it's still 182 work days on C basis and 12 paid holidays. So if we were to expand that number, that would be negotiable. What will be negotiable is if there are any effects of the calendar that the unions identify and would like to negotiate. Of course, we are open to negotiating any effects that that calendar might have. But as far as the actual calendar, as long as the 182 days or the 200 plus holidays stay the same, then it is not negotiable.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Dr. McKenna.
Yeah, first I want to thank Dr. Chait and all the other people who worked on this. I know it can be contentious, but you worked through it. And everything that's seen through more than one lens is contentious. Doesn't mean it have to be disagreeable. But it ought to come down on the side of what's best for children. And then there are other people that are important too, including staff members, including parents, including the range of economic benefit to different parents and other parents. But I applaud you for doing this. I see it through the lens of a former administrator on a campus. Mr. Schmerlson and I have that in common here in LA. And preparing our children for a break doesn't always mean everybody uses the break the same way. And some take a break to just break, and they don't even look back at school, and they think, oh, school's not starting again, is it? And it just goes by so fast to them. And others use it for a time to prep for, their studies and what goes next, and what are they trying to do? Where are they on the range of academic achievement? Are they in the senior year? Are they preparing for college? Are they just trying to barely get through and say, I don't know what to do next, but I just want to get out of here? I've heard all of that. And it's funny on the one hand and it's heartbreaking on the other. And one of the things that troubles me, it invariably happens in the senior year. Some students who are qualified and have all their credits entering the senior year, and all they need to do is finish the senior year with all their credits intact. And invariably, there'll be some students who do not make it across the stage. When I say across the stage, I mean, when I was a principal, you had to have a diploma coming to you when you walked across that stage. Otherwise, you had to come to summer school. And one of the most tragic things that you have to deal with is the parents who come to you and say, people have come from all over the country to see him or her walk across the stage. And I say, yeah, I know, but they didn't pass this class that they needed. And it's only one class. Can't you let them walk across the stage? And I said, no, I really can't, because walking across the stage is a sacred thing for the people who are actually graduating. And they put that cap and gown on, and everybody came to see them because they deserve to be here. Now, they can still get a diploma, but they can't walk across that stage. That's a tough one for a person who has to say no to parents who love their children. And you, as the administrator, love the child, but they didn't make it. That happens sometimes. Does this have anything to do with it? Sometimes it does. Because when they take a break, as I said, they really break, and there's something we have called, ignominiously, what we call a senioritis. And what does that mean? Did you catch that? Do you earn it? Do you give it?
You catch it.
Pardon me?
You catch it.
You can
I
catch
taught
it.
seniors for years. You catch it.
I have too, and I'm saying, do you catch it from other people?
It is
Is
contagious.
it in the air? Is it because of the schedule? Is what happens to you? And you take a breath and say, boy, I can take it easy now. I'm in the last semester. And they take it easy and don't make it. It's like being in a basketball game. You got a 10-point lead with 2 minutes left to play. We got this. And you turn around, and before you know it, those 3-pointers take you out of the game, and you wind up losing by 1 point. This is a work of effort and a work of art, and I appreciate you for this, that you put it before us. Because we've debated this back and forth before you got here, Mr. Chen, and after you're gone, we might still be debating it. But it's in the best interest, we feel, of the students for us to help them get the maximum amount of education and learning from this. Remember this, for those who don't feel it yet, once the student leaves high school, they cannot come back. Can they continue their education? Yes, they can someplace else, but they can't come back to high school. You can't come back. And that's a hard thing for some who say, I don't want to leave yet. But you said you couldn't wait to get out. But now you're looking at it and saying, now what do I do? And this schedule has a lot to do with that. This is the last chance they get to take a break and then come back for the last round, for the seniors. The others will gradually get into it. But again, I want to compliment you and your team for going through this, reporting to us. We may not all be satisfied, but that was then the point of this, to try to satisfy everyone. Anybody trying to do that is kind of crazy. I don't think you can satisfy everyone. You shouldn't try. But you can try to come in as fairly, as we say, equitably as you can. I think you've done that. Thank you very much.
I'm going to disagree, Board Member Schmierlson, slightly with you.
Okay.
And that is, I think the survey was good. We didn't say we were taking a vote on it. We were saying, how do you feel about it? And the reason I say that is when I saw as many as about 20 or 25% saying, no, they want a shorter winter break, it reminded me of all of the parents last winter who said to me, I don't know what to do with my kids the third week. There were some park stuff for the first 2 weeks because all the schools were out, but I didn't know what to do with my kids the third week. And I have a job where if I miss a day, I'm fired. So sometimes it isn't the majority that gets to win. But you still want to know what the majority think. That's my view anyway of the survey. I think the survey was a good idea to ask everybody. We found out that a whole lot of people like it the way it is. But the people who don't like it the way it is, in my opinion, had needs that we weren't ever addressing. And I think sometimes, even if you're in the minority, if your needs are important, like what do I do with my kids the third week when I have a job I can't take a day off from, that to me was very compelling. Also, as a teacher, I do remember very well kids coming back after 3 weeks. It was, in some cases, like, what were we talking about? What's going on? It's a long time. It really is a long time. And if you didn't get to the Civil War by Christmas in my youth history course, there was no 20th century, so you had to keep moving there. So all the social studies teachers in the room know what I'm talking about. But what I'm saying is I think sometimes it's always good to know what everybody thinks, but it doesn't mean to say to them, we're giving you a vote and the highest vote wins. Now, if that was broadcast to people, then that was a mistake. I agree with you entirely. But I think we were trying to find out how people felt. And from my point of view, it was very helpful to me. Because if that number had been 5% or 10%, I would say almost everybody's happy. But it wasn't. It was a lot higher than that. And in neighborhoods, in some of the neighborhoods I represent, it was probably 50 or 60% who wanted it changed. So that's that equity thing that sometimes means that the majority didn't need that equity piece, but the minority did. And that's for me was very important. That and the fact that the folks that I know that teach AP say that extra week will be very helpful in preparing them for the AP tests.
Okay, I appreciate that, Jackie, and the ability to listen to others and hear other opinions is what counts. So maybe on the survey, there should be a disclaimer. This survey is only for our information only. It doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Because I could understand why people would think that they were voting and that the majority would win. I can understand that absolutely. Okay, so thank you very much. I think this is a bold step, but I think it's the right step. I think that the fact that that third week for so many families, at least in the board district I represent, was a real hardship. And others will be very unhappy because they loved that third week, and that for those who could afford to travel, it means less travel. I understand all of the implications of this, but I think it's the right decision. I really do, and so I'm going to support it. All right. We need a motion on item number 11.
Oh, just one moment.
Oh, sorry. Oh, we have one speaker.
We have one. It's going to get complicated. For tab 11, Joanna Belson, I see you signed up. I also see you're not here. So this closes public comment on tab 11.
All right. So then we are done with tab 11. All right. Then a motion is in order to
I'll move
adopt the report number 11 for instructional calendar. Moved by Dr. McKenna, seconded by Board Member Gomez. Call the roll, please.
All right. Dr. McKenna.
Yes.
Dr. Rivas,
Yes.
Mr. Schmerlson,
Yes.
Mr. Melvoin, Ms. Gomez,
Yes.
Ms. Ortiz Franklin.
We'll ask the roll be held open for Ms. Ortiz Franklin, because she will be back.
Roger that.
But that item would pass with or without her vote.
Yes. Board President Goldberg
Yes.
and Student Member Shin.
Yes.
All right, we now come to item 12, the second interim multi-year projection, and it also has a presentation.
Good afternoon. Here to present today then the second interim. Important to note at the outset here that the material that is presented is as of, I'm going to withdraw that comment, as of January 31st. And so any comments with regard to the numbers has to be qualified and understood that it is not a current day snapshot, and it is a follow-up to the first interim. With that said, to remind where we are on a calendar, this is an important date, even if it is a bit perfunctory, a requirement of state law to give an assessment of where we are in terms of our ability to finish in the black in this current budget year and the two forecast periods, which would take us through the school year 23-24 and 24-25. This is on the front end, if you will, of a budget development process that will conclude with our coming back to you in May with a characterization of our budget that would be proposed to you in June for the school year 23-24, and then would extend our forecast period to include 24-25, but different than this interim report would include the then third year of 25-26. In terms of the second interim, it is, as you can read for yourself, a requirement of state law. We have covered this on a number of occasions. If there are questions in particular to the aspects of what is required, happy to address those, but at the core of it, it is that last bullet. Staff is commending for the board's consideration a determination of positive, which is to say we have resources adequate to cover the forecast expenses, such as they are qualified as of January 31st, 2023, relative to our forecast period. In terms of the year-over-year change, and as one would compare the first and second interims, I will maintain that there is not a substantive difference. Yes, we are moving in tens of millions of dollars within any given year, but in the context of our overall budget, to see a movement of $44 million in the first year, followed by the subsequent movement of 123, and then finishing out with another, moving in the opposite direction, another 139, taking in all total a movement of $60 million across the 3 years. Yes, material on one hand, but in the context of our budget and where we stand, I would suggest to you that there is not a material difference. With that said, some of the highlights do include our adjustments in the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, as is prescribed to us by the state and associated entities. We have made certain adjustments between first and second interim to better reflect actuals. As you may recall, the first interim report was delivered in December, and it had actuals through October, is my recollection. So we do have 3 additional months of actuals to report here, and as you are well aware, we did receive the governor's proposed budget in January. So those have been factored into our forecast, but you can see it is not a material difference. In terms of the governor's outlook, just a comment here. As you may recall, when that budget was released, we did receive commentary that we should be mindful that the state may need to pump the brakes. While they were not using language to suggest that we are in a recession, they were cautioning about the negative outlooks as it related to inflation and the performance of the state's economy, particularly around Silicon Valley. The events more recently suggest that their forecasts may prove to be too true for comfort. We will need to see what the effects of those are as the legislative process plays out, and we then receive a budget in May and ultimately what is enacted by the state in June. In terms of our fiscal outlook, we are improved in some regard. Our enrollment forecast is not as steep a decline as we had once anticipated, but it is not to say that we are a growing enrollment district at this time. It also is fair for us to say that we continue to face significant headwinds in the context of our forecasts, and those are outlined in the bottom bullet here. It is also important to note that as of the date of this report, again, second interim is as of January 31st. We do not have any agreements. We do not have anything that was not in fact acted upon by the Board of Education or dictated to us by other parties such as the state or federal government. So the additional contributions that might be contemplated for any liabilities are not here. The unrealized losses on cash balances, we do make an adjustment, but those will not be provided to us in final form until the county closes its books later at the end of their fiscal year, which coincides with ours in June. We also do have certain assumptions around capital planning and what have you, but those are not finalized and wouldn't be finalized until such time as they are presented to you and acted on by the Board of Education in June. Finally, there is to remind folks, there is conversation at the state level of adding additional dollars through an equity multiplier. We have not included those. That is an example of where the state is proposing a certain allocation of funds targeted to certain student populations. While we are aware of that, it is, in the grand scheme of things, not that material at a statewide level at $300 million. Yes, we would expect to receive a preponderance of those dollars, but we have not factored that in. That kind of addition, should it pass, would be something of consequence that we would want to then address. It is also the reason we kept it here all the same, is because I think if the state is having fiscal constraints, it will be interesting to see how they balance a idea for a new initiative, something of this nature, against the more constitutionally bound commitments that they have. You may recall, and I'll remind you that it is my estimation that when the state does not hit its reserves, that they are signaling that they are concerned about what's to come. And when you don't hit your reserves, you are more inclined to balance the budget than by making cuts. Given the nature of the state's legal framework, where they will make cuts will be not against constitutional mandates, but rather where they have discretion, largely in the allocation of funds for one-time or short-run program. In terms of the forecast, a picture worth at least 100 words, if not 1,000. The solid line is the one that is most relevant for us at this point in time. It is depicting the difference in the solid line from the dotted being the first interim, the solid being the second, and where we are. As I spoke of earlier today, and to hearken back to when we were before you with the first interim, we did speak to the enrollment changes and what we had assumed about the average daily attendance. We continue to maintain the average daily attendance at 90% of total. To be clear, that is down from what the district's historical ADA was pre-pandemic. At that point in time, it was closer to 95%. However, of late, we do not have reason today to make those adjustments. We hope to know more in in April-May timeframe, and that may be a place where you'll see change. I would suggest to keep an eye on that as we come into the June budget period. First interim and second interim then play across the multiple years between enrollment and ADA, and you can see how when the June budget was adopted, we had a forecast that would take us to 378,000 students in the year 24-25. That has been revised upward by about 25,000 students to 402,000. Correspondingly, ADA as a constant percent through this, you're seeing that the ADA has moved from 341,000 upwards to 363. That type of increase and the resulting impact on our multi-year forecast has been included. In terms of the depiction of that, you see here, again, the solid line is the second interim, and you see the various, if you will, bars depicting the different years between enrollment and ADA and what was forecast at the time the budget was adopted, as opposed to first interim. Just to refresh on what we had spoken of last time here, the intersection of the first interim and budget enrollment lines there in 23-24 was because at that point in time we did not have enough information in hand to make a multi-year forecast, which we now believe that we do, and as a result you see then that the second interim line rises above what you would have seen previously. Sorry. In terms of our ending fund balance, actually has gone up by an immaterial, in grand scheme of things, amount, but you continue to see the depiction of fund balance as we have maintained for some time, restricted, committed, assigned, unassigned, and leading to a total. A brief primer on that. The non-spendable, those are inventory, they're restricted. Think of those as monies coming to us from grantors or the federal government with strings attached for which the Board of Education has virtually no autonomy on how to change that. Committed is actions that the board takes to commit funds for current or future purpose. It is at the level of the Board of Education, and if we were to change those commitments, it takes action of the board to unwind those. If we expend monies consistent with that commitment, no further action of the board is needed because we met the commitment. The assigned dollars are dollars that are assigned, if you will, by the Board of Education or a legislative body to a CEO, in this instance the superintendent or a superintendent's delegate, to utilize those funds in a manner consistent. However, different than the committed funds, it doesn't take the action of the legislative body, in this instance the Board of Education, to reappropriate those funds for different purposes. That leaves the unassigned balance, which is most easily described as meeting none of the criteria above and is truly just unassigned. That said, the state, one more time, gives us a but for an amount that we need to maintain for economic uncertainty. It equates to 2%. It is often mischaracterized as an amount necessary for us to maintain 2 months of operating income. Far and away not true. 2% would be woefully inadequate for us to be able to pay our bills for 2 months. Might get 2 days, but just to be a little flippant about it, but it is really the undesignated under the unassigned that I would consider to be free and clear, and as you can see here, that is now summing to less than $100 million. With that said, I'm happy to field any questions that you may have.
We have someone from the public that wishes to be heard. I think we should hear them before we open it to the board.
Okay, here we go. David Tokovsky, are you on the line? David Tokovsky, if you're on the line, press *6 to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. David Tokovsky.
Yes, just a reminder, there's a time lag between unmuting and asking for unmuting, so that's why you don't hear people right away. First of all, I want to congratulate the superintendent and board and president on a heroic effort to move things forward and get back to the teaching of kids. The $4.9 billion, as you heard now, is growing into the $5 billion, 5.8 on the document being sent to the county. That doesn't mean, as Board Member Goldberg knows, because she was here when we had an 8% 3-year pay raise, that on the 92 recession, there was a need to give back 10%, and some employees gave back 12%. So it's very important to move beyond the CFO's report, which is very good for telling us the categories and the risks, but the fiscal outlook. But let's keep our eyes on the prize. What was done to move the monies for hopefully all employees across the district is really good. Now, declining enrollment. In one fell swoop, governors told us get all the 4-year-olds in public school. Let's get them in. We are probably 30,000 kids short of the 3 and 4-year-olds we could have at LA Unified. 30,000 far exceeds any declining enrollment. Board president highlighted affiliated charters. If our online school, our magnet schools, our option schools were designated as affiliated charters, they'd still be union, but they'd probably bring in 30,000 more kids. That's 60,000 new kids. And as my colleague Jim Morris, who's running Inglewood School, says that's each and every year, because the 4-year-olds become 5-year-olds, and then you get more 4-year-olds. So it's about not falling asleep and getting more revenue. May revision, board member told us about the CSBA efforts on the arts, on the COLA, and so on. But we're woefully applying for community schools. It says in the document you have there $9 million out of $3 billion. LA Unified is normally 10 or 15% of the total amount. That means we should be at $350 million in community schools money. CTE, in the document you have before you being sent to the county, says you have gotten $4.9 million. The amounts of money in the Biden infrastructure bill that are coming through Sacramento to help kids pursue good middle-class jobs should be in the hundreds of millions for the district. So let's move forward together, change calendar. Let's get the revenue to keep growing it, even though there may be some risks of downturn. LA Unified is the most powerful political entity, and with the mayor on our side in the current settlement, she will help get those revenues out of Sacramento and Washington. And the land that we have in excess ought to be a revenue stream. We plotted that in 2005, 6, and 7. It's been over 16 years, and we haven't put those plans into action for revenue.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Tarkovsky. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Fees, the failure to get to.
Okay. Tracy Cook, are you here? Tracy Cook, if you're here, come on up. You'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin.
Good afternoon. I'm Tracy Cook, public school parent. I'm here because the superintendent and CBO are presenting the second interim financial report, which was generated for submission to LACO and CDE on February 28th, and yet it is being offered to you today. This violates the California Ed Code 42130, which states that this report be certified and sent to LACO by March 17th. That was 10 days ago. Why was this not done properly by your superintendent? Are we now in the business of violating ed codes? Dear Lord. And why was this report not given to you on February 28th or early March? No reasonable person would consider 24 hours an adequate amount of time to study a $10 billion budget, a budget that the eyes of the nation are looking at. The superintendent and CBO offered a remarkable presentation at the February CAL. Slide 5 had COLA numbers projected by the governor's office, but slide 17 had COLA numbers by another group. There was zero discussion on ESSER. The board was thrown under the bus when the superintendent said that you approved the revised budget, which included the resolution moving $801 million into the committed for the Inflation Protection Fund. Or maybe you really wanted to park and invest those $801 million. In today's report, that 801 has morphed into $1.6 billion spread over 3 years. And today's report has a proportionality section, which the CBO did not mention just now, a table that was not there in the first interim or any of the budgets. And this report, generated on February 28th, has the resolution of $196 million already baked into the ending projections of $5.1 billion. How is that possible? You haven't even voted on it today, let alone on February 28th. And then there are the arts. The superintendent used $2 million out of $256 million one-time grant money. $2 million out of $256. What an embarrassing disconnect with Angelino families and their desires for art in the classroom. Did that $256 million get parked into that $801 million inflation fund? In short, this budget is weaponized against the workforce of LAUSD. It is being used in negotiations. But schools are not in a vacuum. They are in our neighborhoods. This weaponization hurts our city. Case in point, canceling primary promise. What is your obligation as a board? Each board member needs to ask, have I been asleep or just plain co-opted into this weaponization? You can continue to defer to the superintendent and CBO as if they are transparent, but instead, go for the greater good, hit pause, and ask meaningful questions with a jaundiced eye on today's pretty slideshow. Do it for LA.
Thank you for your time. This concludes public comment on tab 12.
All right, questions and discussion on the interim report. Ms. Ortiz-Franklin.
Thank you, and thanks to the team. I'll start with a couple just broad questions. There are lots of things not yet contemplated because this was produced a couple of weeks ago. Raises, health benefits, cybersecurity. What can you say at this point about what you might expect to see change between now and June?
To the extent the board takes actions to approve agreements with any of the bargaining units, or that there are subsequent agreements that would impact our benefits, those would be brought forward in the budget proposed for 23-24 and reflected in the multi-year forecast thereafter. If the actions of the board were to contemplate what would necessarily be an amendment to this year's budget, that would be that would require board action that would then result in a revision to this year's budget.
So just in layman's terms, if any of our negotiations result in this school year, 22-23, or prior school years, you'll bring forward a revised budget before June of this school year?
I'll put it this way. If there are agreements that have retroactive elements, we won't require prior year budget amendments, but it would be reflected in amendments to this year's budget. And then to the extent any of those agreements contemplate a go-forward action, that would then be captured also in subsequent year budgets.
And how do you imagine the third year out sort of balance if we end up in the same place or not in terms of confidence of not breaking the bank?
In terms of the, I don't have any, I'm not in possession of any knowledge that in terms of the materials that are being presented to you now for the 22-23 budget or the 2 forecast period would have us change from being positive.
Great, so we're pretty sure we'll still stay positive.
Through the forecast period.
Thank you. And then there was another document we received, attachment B. I don't know if you all, I don't think you talked about that. It was a resolution to commit fund balance for this fiscal year. And there was a short description of the carryover from this school year and a staffing equity grant. You didn't talk about that in the presentation, did you?
I did not.
Could you briefly?
I'm happy to. Thank you for the question, board member. I would put it in this context. It's more of a technical amendment. If I believed that the full amount of those dollars allocated in the course of the budget for this year were going to be fully expended, we wouldn't need to make the amendment. That said, we do expect that there will be a balance remaining, and in trying to create an alignment between two, I wouldn't say they're competing, but we are balancing a requirement of state law to not have a fund balance of greater than 10%, and also these funds come with strings attached to your comment. They are an equity allocation for schools, staffing equity, and so we need to make sure that if there is a balance remaining as of June 30th, that we have set aside those funds only for that purpose. If there are more detailed questions, staff is here to give much greater line item detail if that's necessary.
I imagine my colleagues might have some more questions. about this, but just to call it out, $196 million. If we still have it at the end of this year, the board needs to commit to use that on a particular bucket, or?
It's essentially saying because of the nature of how state law wants those funds maintained and for that purpose, and we have reason today to believe there will be a balance, you're taking the action today to say if there is a balance greater than zero, it will only be used for that purpose. Just to be clear, there could be action. This is one of those line items, if you will, that's within committed. If we wanted to change the purpose for that, we would have to then come back to the Board of Education to have you redirect the use of those funds.
Is this the same thing as sweeping CENI dollars from schools and bringing
No.
it back to Central? No. Okay.
Has nothing, yeah, worlds apart. I think, I don't want to overplay this, but it gives us more flexibility rather than less.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Well, thank you for the presentation. I also have a few questions. On slide 5, you mentioned that the long-term trend of declining enrollment is projected to continue, but at a lower rate of decline, which is extremely welcome news. I was wondering if you could help explain, do we know to what extent this is due to our universal preschool efforts?
We do look at the forecast, if you will, from earliest age through high school, and I know that the folks that are doing that are doing this based on a little, I refer to it as alchemy. They would probably say it's an algorithm related to birth rates, related to what they're seeing in terms of in and out migration. So it is a complicated formula that they're utilizing. As you and I have spoken before, we know that there will be a ramping up. I think we spoke last time of San Diego as a good example where first year proved to be about 75–80% of a second year, which then led to a higher level of enrollment in a final year. To the comments that were made during the public commentary, are there ways for us to further attract student populations? I think the answer to that is yes. So to what degree? It's a little bit, I wouldn't know how to put a percent on it. And part of, as we spoke of too, is we don't know, are we capturing students at an earlier age that we would have just gotten 1 year later? And so are we getting a net uptick in enrollment? That's really hard to decipher at this point in time.
That seems like important analysis to be done, because I think it would be helpful to understand what is the opportunity before us and how could we capitalize on it, and whether those are additional students or just earlier. And in addition to the universal transitional kindergarten, 3-year-olds are also another opportunity that the board has laid out as an area that we want to focus on enrolling more of them. So there might be funds that we should expend now to grow those programs faster that will pay off financially in the future, as well as academically and equitably for the students.
I agree. And I think to the extent we can not only attract the student population, but also, if you will, have them as students, we end up buying down the cost of the election their education over time.
Absolutely.
No arguments here.
On page 3 of the board report, attachment A references both an underspend in ESSER, approximately $122 million, and ELOPE of $47 million. Can you help us explain what contributed to that underspend and what happens to those funds, given that they have certain time limitations by which the funds need to be spent by?
Sure. There are any number of the accounts that are coming to us from various COVID relief or other grant earmarked funds. Generally, we're seeing an underspend. Sometimes the underspend is in, not to make this more complicated, it may be in a general fund, and part of that may be because we're able to move general fund expenses over to grants. Or we find different grants that we're using, or we find that sometimes we're not as successful in hiring or otherwise utilizing those dollars. Generally, in particular ELOP, the strings on that are pretty tight. And so we are having to work to try to find a sufficient body, if you will, of expenses to fully hit that particular account. And it is one that I think it's fair to say if we had the ability to wave that wand, we would look for a waiver, both by use of funds and the duration for which we have to expend them.
It's also at the time in which dollars came in, so you had ELOG, which is the grant base, and then ELOP. And we had a significant set of carryover in ELOG, which we are expending and preserving the ELOP funds for future expenditures. So it's also a factor of when dollars are available and which ones we want to expend on a tighter timeline. So it looks underspent, but when you're talking about the overall services that have been dedicated, it's just covered by another fund source currently.
A little bit of a traffic jam that we're having in the use of these funds. I do want to say this. I have every confidence that come the end of the day, when those funds are use them or lose them kind of mentality, a little too cavalier perhaps, I don't expect us to have to return funds. I don't expect us to not be able to claim funds that we could otherwise make an assertion are due to us for reimbursement. Are we right now below where we thought we'd be? Mm-hmm. Do I think we'll be okay a year's time from now? I do.
That was my subsequent question. So I'm glad to hear that you don't think any money will be left on the table. We will.
Won't always be
expend those
easy,
dollars.
but we'll find a way.
Okay. And then just to follow up on Board Member Ortiz Franklin's questions, could you explain for the public why the GASB 54 rule requires that the board commit certain funds?
Oh, I hate the pop quiz. Which one is 54?
It's the one that's referenced in attachment B.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I thought we were going to go to OPEB for a minute. The requirements of different characterizations of fund balance is just so there. I think the easiest and most direct way to put it is so that the legislative body knows where they do or do not have discretion and how that discretion is otherwise represented within a current budget year over a forecast period. So when funds are coming to a legislative body, so federal to state, state to local government, in this instance a school district, there are, the vernacular, there are strings attached. You don't have discretion on to use funds that you got for purpose A to use them for purpose E. At best, we then try to figure out how it is we're going to find eligible expenses for those dollars within the time frames allowed. ELOP is a good example of that. There's a long list, and so that's...
ELOP being?
Oh, sorry, the Extended Learning Opportunities Program.
I just think we should say these things out loud because people don't know what ELOP is.
You guys are getting me on the pop quiz today.
That's all right. It's all good.
It's all good. But those are examples of where, to the point, extended learning. So it's not meant for the, if you will, the core of the school day. So we're having to find expenses, and it's a sizable amount of money that would be expensed after school or before school, and in proportion to the costs that we incurred during the normal school day. While always welcome, we're having to work to find eligible expenses.
Understood. And then can you speak more to the limits of the commitment that's outlined in attachment B? That is, can those dollars be spent differently than as outlined, or are we strictly limited to what's listed?
If they're in the committed, it's pretty strict. Where it gets into, excuse me, I misspoke. When it's in the restricted, it's pretty strict. When it goes to committed, it's usually if you will, an exchange that occurs between the legislative body and the CEO, in this instance between the Board of Education and the superintendent, and we reflect that within the budget document. In this particular circumstance, because of the state law saying that, we triggered you can't have more than 10% sitting in the assigned or unassigned, it pushed us to say, okay, we're going to use these balances that would otherwise show with some discretion. You as a board, you as a district need to make a commitment of how you will use those funds on a multi-year basis if you can't expend them now. And that's what our budget has done.
And then just last question on this, and I have one more on another topic. Do we know if the equity grant where we receive these funds from has a sunset date from the state? And I think that the LAO mentioned in its review of the governor's budget that one-time grants are likely to be eliminated.
So I'm going to take that as two questions. To your second one, that is true. I'm not remembering about Saman may recall.
Saman Rava Karimi, Director of Finance Policy. The staffing equity grant is coming from LCFF concentration grant funds. So a couple years ago, the concentration grant amount was increased. It did come with some strings attached. Those funds had to be used at schools that have 55% or greater unduplicated percentage and have to be used for staff. So these, we called it staffing equity grant funds, but that is the ongoing source of funding. It's LCFF concentration.
Helpful clarification. Thank you. And then just my final question. In regards to program code 16929, page 11 of the board report, there are a few items for that program code: SENI, primary promise, data dig services, et cetera. Can you remind the board how those were committed in the first interim?
Off the top, no, but let me see if someone's going to come to the rescue.
You're referring to the commitments on page 11?
Yeah, I think there's a SENI reserve, a primary promise reserve, a reserve for data dig services.
Sure. So the SENI reserve was a commitment that was first committed in the June budget, and it's $600 million because it's 2 years worth of contributions to SENI of $300 million each. Their contributions to maintain the full funding level at the total of $700 million for the 23-24 school year and the 24-25 school year. So of the 600, there's again half for next year, half for the following year to maintain SENI at the full $700 million allocation for schools.
And the reason to do it as a reserve rather than individualized program code commitments?
They're committed because they're coming out of our undesignated balances. And so that's why it's a commitment coming to maintain it at $700 million. At the time of the commitment, there were not sufficient TSP funds, what we call them, the targeted student population funds, to fund the full amount. So we had to find alternative sources. Just like in the current year and last year, the additional $300 million came from ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 respectively.
Thank you.
You may also recall this was one of the techniques we used where the balance, if we hadn't made those types of commitments, would have been above the 10%. So it was, when I say there's a symbiotic between a board and the superintendent, this was a natural to say, okay, you have the resolution asking for, we had the funds, let's make that commitment known.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Hart. I think you've touched on this before, but I just want to ask for a little bit of clarification. So is it correct to say that because we're required to report the financials at fair market value, the money that's with the county treasury pool, because interest rates are rising, those assets have fallen below par, and that's why it's showing up as an unrealized loss?
Thank you for the question. The easy answer is yes. It's a little more complicated, but essentially we bought, in the colloquial we, the county as a fiduciary and behaving, if you will, as the trust, if you will, of our funds. They invested funds to have a certain maturity. Right now, when you mark those, if you were to go to sell those, I'm making up my numbers, bottom at 2% when rates are at 4%. If you were forced to sell those, you'd sell them at a loss to be able to equate to a current market yield. It is a requirement, back to the accounting rules, don't ask me which one, please, board member, I'm going to ask, that we will have to mark to market. As I've said to the board before, we do not expect to actually realize that loss, but we also have no discretion in how it is reported.
Okay, thank you. That was my follow-up to that one. And then for the inflation reserve fund, I think we talked about it before, 801 million in that inflation protection fund. So we just had a speaker, and let me know if I'm violating any rules, but we just had a speaker come up and say something along the lines that that allocation had been increased to 1.6 billion, but that is not the case?
We have not changed that allocation as of this time.
Okay. And then if we see future changes in compensation, where, you know, especially for Title I schools when they're doing their budgeting and there are these changes in compensation beyond the PFV they've budgeted for, is that something that can be paid out of the inflation reserve fund? I'm just trying to understand a little bit about what it's going to be used for.
If there are agreements reached that then have a increased costs of personnel, there is a menu of options for how respective budget holders will need to, if you will, absorb those costs. Some of that is in how we allocate funds. Some of that is in the nature of how funds are retained by respective budget holders. And that's, I think it's fair to say at this moment in time, no one should be deceived if there are subsequent agreements where personnel cost more in a future period than today. There is no ability within the general fund to hold budget holders, individual budget holders, harmless.
Thank you. And then my last question is, I think on the first interim report, we went over a bunch of the different grants that the district was receiving, and one of those was the internet connectivity grant. Right. And so when we were looking at it, we saw there was a significant unspent portion of those funds. It didn't necessarily mean that we weren't getting those connectivity resources out. It was just that the money we received was a lot, and so we didn't need to use all of it. So we were discussing the possibility of seeing whether we could work with our government partners and see whether like that money could be used on capital outlays for maintenance of connectivity, or like putting internet services in community centers or something like that where students go to study after school. I was wondering if there was any progress or changes on that front.
That continues to be a place of advocacy. We collectively put together a letter for ongoing advocacy in this space with districts throughout the state of California and nationally. We've also extended it to kind of cybersecurity, and we're talking about the use of ECF and other funds, E-rate funds, to support our infrastructure needs, including internet connectivity. So that's a effort in progress. We haven't received any results from it, but we're hopeful that that will come to fruition.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back just a minute to your presentation on page 6 on factors not reflected. So we know from one contract that there are some dramatic increases in health and welfare costs, correct?
Yes.
We've already agreed to that. We know that there are additional impacts of all of the negotiations that have been completed and are currently going on. Where do we see that there's no more interims, so where do we see that change before we adopt a new budget?
Board member, I appreciate your question. I anticipate that we'll get into that detail at the time the AB 1200, which is, is the requirement of the state when a school district enters into an agreement with a bargaining unit, that you, if you will, go through the itemization of revenues and expenses, demonstrating that the district is able to afford the agreement that it is entering into. And I would suggest that would be the opportune time. As to when that will occur, soon.
Before we have to adopt next year's budget?
That's outside of my control, but I
no,
would certainly hope so, yes.
Probably, okay. So that when we begin to discuss next year's budget, we will know the impact of all of our negotiations should they be completed in time.
You and I shared our presumption.
Okay, very good. Tell me about the potential cybersecurity investments. What's the magnitude? Is it bigger than a bread box, or is it small? Is it humongous? What does that impact look like it might be?
I think it's always begs the question, how big is your bread box? But I think it is bigger than a bread box. And, part of the strategy that we are going to have is how are we going to afford the significant capital investments, whether we're talking about electrification or whether we're talking about, cyber security issues. That too will be part of a presentation, I think, that will accompany the budget for 23-24.
Can ESSER money be used for cybersecurity?
We are looking at that, but it will be a challenge.
What can be used for cybersecurity? Is there anything besides general fund?
I see the superintendent sat forward, so I'll hold my comment for a moment.
Maybe. So we are, in fact, in a process of attempting to modify FCC E-rate policies to allow for E-rate monies to be used for the purpose of cybersecurity. And in
That
fact,
would make sense.
we began this journey a number of months back, and we got over 1,000 superintendents across the country to agree with us on the possible change to regulations to provide that additional flexibility. So that's one of our highest priorities right now at the federal level. So that would become a second fund source for our cybersecurity needs.
Okay, because we're going to have to do it. So the question is there something besides general fund can be used? I'm not sure that it can be bonded unless it's equipment maybe that's.
Correct. It's a combination of one-time resources. We're looking at both bond as well as grants that are available. There are state grants that were recently provided by the federal government, although very small grants, as well as looking at the repurposing of any general fund program that may have overlap on reinforcing some of the cybersecurity efforts that the district's already pursuing.
Okay. I actually have quite a number of other questions, but I'm going to hold them for another time and maybe have a meeting with all of you about them because you know me and these documents, so I don't need to have it done all here in public. I do want to say that I think it's important for us to keep in mind that this interim report looks a lot like the last one because it hasn't included all of the negotiations and some of the other things that we've decided to do. So I want the public to understand that while we're presenting what are the actual facts at this moment, these facts are going to change dramatically, not in small ways, but dramatically because of the amount of money that it costs to conclude successful multi-year negotiations. So I just think that's important for the public to understand, because if you look at 1 and 2, it looks like, oh my goodness, they're just about the same, and it's okay, and nothing's a problem, and so forth and so on. And I hope that continues to be the news, but I do want to say that this, it's very important for the public to understand that this report does not reflect any of the negotiations that we've completed or will complete. And there's significant money in there. So hopefully we can get, not an interim 3, because I would never ask for that, but hopefully we could get maybe some informative updates before we actually have to deal with the next year's budget. That will help some of us think about what things we might want to be looking at in order to make sure that we have positives for all 3 years. So I would just request that maybe we can get some informatives on, after all this has been finished with negotiations, where we stand in terms of how we should look at this as we look at 23-24's budget.
I think to, board member, if I might, to the shared presumption, you should anticipate that if there are the results of those negotiations coming forward for board action, what you're contemplating will be our reality.
Good. Okay, anybody else? Last chance, last chance? Okay, motion is in order on item 12. Don't all speak at once. Moved by Mr. Schmerlson, seconded by Dr. McKenna. Okay, call the roll, please.
Okay. Dr. McKenna?
Yes.
Dr. Rivas?
Yes.
Mr. Schmerlson?
Yes.
Mr. Melvoin has left, I believe. Ms. Gomez? Ms. Ortiz-Franklin?
Yes.
Board President Goldberg?
Yes, and we'll keep the roll open for Ms. Gomez. I believe she's coming back, is she?
In the event that she returns, and the advisory vote from Mr. Shin? Okay.
I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so, and going back to tab 11, the roll was held open for Ms. Ortiz-Franklin. Would you like to record your vote?
Yes, and yes.
Roger that.
All right. And now we come, having finished the agenda, to the public comment time.
Okay, we are going to begin general public comment, but before we do that, and I might be shouting into a well with respect to what I'm going to say, I want to make an announcement. Everyone here at the dais, including the staff members behind us, have this device in front of them, and this device is used to conduct simultaneous translation. And so what this means for the folks inside the boardroom is that those members of the public who wish to give public comment in a language other than English, which at this point is often Spanish, they will speak in Spanish here in the podium. And those of us at the dais who do not speak Spanish or who wish to hear the translation in English will put these devices on, turn them on to channel 2, which they should already be set to here at the dais, and you will be hearing the translation simultaneously as the public comment is given. So this means that all public comments will be 3 minutes, just as they are for simultaneous translation that comes through Zoom. And hopefully we will get an opportunity to use this today, although I'm not sure that that is going to happen. So also for those in the audience, if you are monolingual or just want to check up on how we're doing our translation, we have plenty of these available for our audience members, should you also like to hear the Spanish translated into English for those speaking in the room. If you have any questions, I can answer them after the meeting if the opportunity arises. If not, we will go ahead and call on our first public commenter. Not very many folks are on the line at this time, so I'm going to call on Maria Palma, who I see is in the audience already.
Good afternoon, board members and Superintendent Carvalho. Superintendent, a few weeks ago, by a formal motion by the parents of DLAC, you were invited to attend their next meeting to address that committee's proposals for parent engagement. Will you attend? I have heard that that has not been responded to. Are you all listening to your customers? Do you know who your customers are? You've said in this room you've heard parent voices, but there are others out there who can't wait to talk to you. Did the public, the parents, create geographical areas with failing schools? Or was it the teachers or the administrators of those schools? Who is responsible for the decrease in real estate property values in areas with failing schools? What about the higher property values surrounding high-performing schools? Who is responsible for the decrease? Why do informed parents with resources shop around for schools and consider their quality as a major factor when choosing where to live? And who is to blame when schools have unequal outcomes? We can use lots of words to describe it. Maybe blame, personal responsibility, luck, greed, corruption, market forces, or parents in action. Superintendent, you can make the statement that LAUSD wants to be the school district of choice, but without an effective change to the district culture, these are just empty words. In my opinion, LAUSD is the school district of last resort. This system keeps us parents isolated in silos. DLAC has requested a parent committee at the regional level. They seek a committee not packed with district compliance items, a parent agenda designed by parents and covering parents' interests. During the pandemic, parents' blindfolds were torn off. We saw the curriculum and our suspicions were confirmed when we saw teachers which were good and which ones were not. Our kids got hurt and we don't yet know to what degree. I've heard from parents most recently who are evaluating homeschooling options. These are not just wealthy parents. These are single-parent households and low-income families arranging small learning pods through their churches, for example. Parents are networking and educators are offering their services to teach certain subjects. You need to know this is happening. It's not just charter schools competing for your customers. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to criminalize homeschooling and send social workers to knock on our doors? So your customers, parents, are seeking and they're finding options. Of course, we don't get the $30,000 a year to homeschool, right? So that's a huge problem, and only certain parents can afford to do it, but they're finding workarounds for it. You have hundreds of families as a captive audience, and you are not treating us as customers. Generations of our children are pushed through the system without learning the basic skills they need to thrive, perhaps not even to survive. You are treating us as numbers, as statistics, and suppressing parent voices. Don't expect us taxpayers to continue to foot the bill indefinitely without providing our money's worth.
Thank you for your time. Isabel Aguirre, I see you're on the line. Isabel Aguirre, if you're on the line, press *6 to unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Isabel Aguirre.
Sí, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, se escucha.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. My name is Isabel Aguirre, and I am a mother of 2 students in Board District 2 at the moment. We can rest easy because we met an agreement with the members of the SEIU union. Of course, after interrupting classes of thousands of students. And my question is, how is it that the district has funds to pay the high wages of those that you have benefits and pensions while the budget for special education is not enough? During these 3 days, again, those students are the ones that are most impacted. And I understand that it was a different situation, or a situation that was difficult for you as well. Thank you for having provided supervision in some of the schools. But unfortunately, many of these sites were not trained to meet the needs of all students that the district serves. And now we have a new concern. We have heard that right now the district is in negotiations with the teacher union, and that possibly they are also thinking of a strike in the fall. Those are just suppositions and comments we've heard, and it's important that we parents are informed of the situation. We need transparency on behalf of the district and also on behalf of the unions if it's possible. The parents, we need to be parts of these negotiations and to have representation because our children are also impacted by these decisions. For the members of the Board of Education, we are intrigued by the silence of not having heard anything from you in regards to your position in these last few days. Thank you so much for your day and good afternoon.
Thank you for your time. Diana Guillen. Diana Guillen, come on up and you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. So at this time, the folks who have your headsets, you put them on, make sure the volume is good once she starts, and if you have a problem, put your hand up.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Diana Guillen, and I have been the chairperson for 4 years at the English Learners. And today I come because we parents are concerned due to the negotiations that, well, wow, I thought that it's something very good that the workers, that they've had everything that they've wanted, 30% of better income. But what is it that will happen with our students? Will we demand that they really have clean schools? Will we demand that the food is hot? That they will have new programs for our students? That the teachers that were supporting the strike, what will happen to them? Will they support our students, or will they just simply say, well, you know what, that's it. This happened, and what is it that we will demand from the teachers so that they can increase student achievement? Is there a plan that the superintendent made? But truly, I feel that they want to increase academically really slow. That's something really bad that we don't understand. They said that go up 1 point, and I don't think that that is truly a benefit for them. And one other thing, Mr. Carvalho, I sent you an email because we wanted to invite you to our meeting this Thursday for DLAC, and you have not answered. And so you can meet with the unions, you can meet with all the organizations, but not with the parents. So we're the ones that bring the students in and that produce the income with our taxes, but you cannot even answer us. We, as parents, want to know if you will come to us so that you can give us an answer, because for 4 years as DLAC, we have had many recommendations for parent engagement because parents are not informed in the school. They are not informed and the parents do not trust you, and that is why they don't engage. The community reps say, oh yeah, well, the parents don't want to participate, but the parents do not trust in you, do not trust you. When will the message get across to you that parents do not trust in you, and that's why they don't engage? And we want also a advocate for parents' rights because there is a union that defends the workers. That's good. To the teachers also and the administrators, every one of you. But who defends our children? Who defends the parents? When you send them a disrupt the parent letter, it's just because the parent doesn't want them to wake up when the parent is asking questions. We want there to be changes. We want that the district that you brought Carvalho with a very good salary to listen to us. We also have Mr. Plasencia that makes $270,000 and it is not working because none of our recommendations he doesn't like. So what will happen, Mr. Carvalho? Can you see us in the face?
Audience. Jovanes, I see you're on the line. Please press *6 to unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Jovanes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I'm here to talk about the employee COVID-19 mandate. Since October 15, 2021, we haven't been allowed to come back on campus. We haven't been able to resume our jobs, continue our education, and we're still struggling throughout the past 2 years. Last week, SEIU, my former union, who called me a hero for working on campus during the pandemic, said that LAUSD needs to respect us for higher wages, yet SEIU, UTLA, and LAUSD didn't respect us. Over 600 classified staff and about 1,000 total employees who were fired for not taking the COVID-19 vaccine. Even Pasadena and Glendale Unified has removed their employee mandate. So I want to know, Superintendent, board members, President, when is LAUSD going to follow the science, follow the CDC guidelines, follow the governor, follow the president, when everybody's removing their mandate, removing their testing, their vaccination requirements? Yet LAUSD still hasn't changed one bit. We have over 4,000 vacancies in LAUSD, whether that's teachers, non-teaching, custodians, teacher assistant staff, and we have a teacher shortage in LAUSD, yet nobody's thinking, let's quickly fill up those spots with people who are ready and qualified, willing to work. We're called a threat to public safety, not allowed to teach students from 8 a.m. to 2:33 p.m., yet me, I go to the same campus I was fired from every Friday to teach the same kids I was going to teach as their 5th grade teacher after school, and I do that for free. So how can I go on LAUSD campus for free to teach after school, but during work hours, I'm not allowed to because I don't have a vaccine? That makes no sense. If I'm a threat to public safety during school hours, then I wouldn't be allowed to teach after school. And I don't have a vaccine. I don't have an exemption. I don't wear a mask. I go every single Friday, 2:40 to 4 p.m., and I teach after school for free. I busted my butt as a teacher assistant, got my degree. I promised my kids I'll be your 5th grade teacher. And with this vaccine mandate, I can't do that. I'm begging and pleading you guys, please, let us return to our jobs.
Thank you for your time, sir. Paula Meneses. I do not see you on the line. I see Miss Veronice Miron. You're on the line now. Please press *6 to unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Veronice Miron.
Hello, good afternoon, board members and superintendent. My name is Berenice Miron, and I am a parent of a student with an IEP in Board District 5. I am calling today to ask you all a question. When can parents expect a historic investment for students with disabilities? I have been attending board meetings virtually for the past 3 years, and I often see how you how you are all excited and inspired to do what's right for students. However, I don't see the same excitement for students with disabilities. I understand that the federal government has not done their part to fully fund IDEA. However, during school closures, the district was provided with record-breaking funding that, to my knowledge, has not been fully utilized to the advantage of these students. What I do see, however, is that the district oftentimes would rather litigate instead of educate. And this often creates an inequity issue because parents of students that come from low-income communities can't afford to hire attorneys that will help them achieve access services for their students. It seems that these parents have become beggars to the district. One example of that, my own example, is that it has been around 10 months and my child's IEE assessor has not been contracted. And I wonder if it's because of the location of where I live or because it's just something that all parents go through. And I have Superintendent Carvalho, during your 100-day plan, you stated that you wanted to develop a system so that parents can try to resolve these issues. However, these systems already exist. The issue is that what I see is that they do not always work. And I have been in contact with Special Education Division. I have provided emails, and I have been provided an update for one of the issues that I've currently facing, but it seems that it's still going to be a struggle. So again, I ask, when will these students and these families be served appropriately? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Rachel V., are you here in person? Rachel V., come on up. You'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin.
Good afternoon, board. As an LUSD parent and a taxpayer of the Constitutional Republic, I'd like to exercise my First Amendment right to freedom of speech and freedom of religion. In the book of Exodus, the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, and the Lord said to Moses to present himself to Pharaoh and say to him, "Thus says the Lord, let my people go that they may serve me." Moses pleaded with Pharaoh the same way that hundreds of unvaccinated staff members have begged you, board members, to allow them to return to work, just like the caller. Why do you deal with your LAUSD servants this way? For almost 2 years, your policies have brought harm and affliction to many, beating them emotionally and just inhumanely treating them, threatening them and their livelihood by stripping them of their jobs. Like Pharaoh, your hearts have been hardened and callous, turning a blind eye to the needs of our community, and you failed to affirm religious convictions against the shots. Mandates have been lifted everywhere, yet LAUSD can't acknowledge their mistake in getting rid of so many valuable and much-needed teachers and staff. Last week, my children, along with many others, lost 3 years of instructional time due to the strike. And other parents have also voiced a concern for a lack of quality instruction in the absence of so many credentialed teachers who have been removed out of the classroom because of your policies. Our schools are understaffed, and not even with the $5,000 hiring stipend that has been offered have you guys been able to meet the staffing needs of our schools. Time and time again, LAUSD is confronted with disorder and tyranny and criminal activities, like Stacy said earlier. Yes, the world is watching. And as our leaders, I ask that you would not condone intolerance or inequality by ostracizing the unvaccinated staff members because of their religious convictions. I tell you today, let God's people go, that they may serve the Lord and shine their lights in the public school system. Like Maria said earlier, we are looking into other alternatives as far as schooling our children. And I pray for you guys every day, I really do. And I pray that the Lord will illuminate you all and give you direction to lead our district, to properly create policies and adopt curriculum that are aligned with righteousness, with morality, and virtue. Peace be with you all.
Thank you for your time. Rocio Alorza, I see you're on the line. Rocio Alorza, please press *6 to unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Rocio Alorza. Rocio, por favor, oprime estrella 6 para hablar.
Buenas tardes, ¿me escuchan?
Sí, se escucha.
Gracias. Buenas tardes, mi nombre
Good
es
afternoon. My name is Rocio G. Elorza. I am a mother of 2 students in LAUSD. And I am a member of some of the central level committees, and I just want to give Mr. Carvalho and the Board of Education, the members of the Board of Education, I just want to thank you because our children do not need to lose any more academic instruction. I know that you have an agreement. I don't know if you will make public the terms, but personally, I think that there is nothing perfect. We have faults where we can make better, we can improve. But I do want to really thank you. There's a lot of people like me that is waiting so that their students are helped. I am waiting at my daughter's school so that I am helped with an IEP or a 504 plan because she needs it. And thank you. I know that there will be a few things that will happen. I'm sorry. There's a few changes that are coming, which the parents that we want to know if it's possible for you to give us that information. What are the terms and what will happen now? Will there be cuts in staff? But thank you for thinking in our students, and I know that you are there for them and for them. And I am, as a mother, here for the students and for you because we need to be a team. And if not, we cannot accomplish anything if we're fighting amongst each other. And I hope that I can get the support, Ms. Jackie Goldberg. Thank you so much as well for all the effort that you do. I always hear your messages, and I just wanted to thank you, and that hopefully you can make public these negotiations. And I don't know how many mothers are like me that need a support for our children, that you can soon give it to us. My daughter's in high school, and I think that she really needs it. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Carvalho, Jackie Goldsberg, Nick Melvin, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Nelly Mendez, I see you're signed up, but not online. Are you here in person? Nelly Mendez. Karina Lopez, I see you're on the line. Please press *6 to unmute yourself, and you have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Karina Lopez. Karina, por favor, oprima estrella 6 para hablar y tiene 3 minutos adelante. Karina Lopez. Going to wait another 10 seconds. Vamos a esperar. Okay. Paula M., are you on the line? Paula M. If you're on the line, please press *6 to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Paula Meneses.
Sí, ¿sí me escuchan?
Sí, se escucha.
Okay, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. My name is Paula Meneses, and I am a district representative. I represent my school. My school is Kingsley Elementary School, and I am at Virginia and Kingsley. Good afternoon, everybody. And I am participating also in ELAC and SSC. And my concern, I did want to say that I have a concern about our school because they want to have a restaurant, and in the restaurant, they want to have alcohol. And we as parents are very concerned because really the time that they think to sell alcohol is during the weekdays, is from Sunday to Thursday from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. And the sale of alcohol is the last call is 10 p.m. The operation is from Friday to Saturday from 10 to 1 with the last call at 12 midnight. And we as parents are very concerned for our children because we know that the children are small and these students, they're not thinking about our children, but they're thinking about their business and making money and having entertainment there. And I do not know. We feel very frustrated. If you could just help us, if we can have a meeting in our school so that we are able to talk with other parents, that we are very concerned and we really need a response that do not let that person to sell alcohol near the school because they're really close. They're right next to each other. And that is my concern.
Okay, thank you for your time. Marcela Garcia, are you there? Marcela Garcia, if you're on the line, press *6 to unmute yourself. And you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. Okay, Marcela is not there. Marcela, are you here in person? Okay. Jocelyn Chairez, are you on the line? Jocelyn Chairez. If you're not on the line, are you in the room? Come on up. You'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Jocelyn Charez. I'm an 11th grader. Well, I am excited but a little bit worried because of the strike. It only took 3 days this time, but I'm worried because it took instructions from the school. Like, we didn't learn nothing. So I am wondering, what are you guys going to do about this? You guys going to be like the pandemic? Like, oh, it was a pandemic, so we can't do nothing about it? Well, I think you guys can. You guys should work with it because it's losing instruction. Special ed kids have lost instruction, and it takes them a long time to figure out the ways and learning the academics on the subjects. I am worried about this. And also the fights. There's a lot of fights happening in schools. Every single week, there's like 1 or 2 fights in schools. That is not good. What, we're going to go, our careers are going to be about fighting? We're not going to learn nothing about this. When we go to our coworkers, we're going to fight our coworkers because we didn't agree on what we did and what they did? No, we guys have to work with this. It's not good. It's not healthy. It's affecting our growth mindset. So I'm worried. This has not happened to me, but I have seen other students. They're scared to come to school every single day. They're crying or they're just in the office because they don't know what to do. They're being bullied. Special ed students are being bullied because supposedly they don't even know the academics of the school, and like other kids that are bigger than them that supposedly know everything are coming over here insulting them. Like, what are you guys gonna do about this? This is not good. And also, you guys are graduating kids that having D's. Are you kidding me? In a college, they're not gonna accept a kid with D's. So I'm worried. I wonder what you guys are gonna do about this. That's why tomorrow, early in the morning, I'm gonna go take a flight to Sacramento, and I'm gonna fight because I'm seeing that you guys are not doing nothing about this. You guys are seeing that our kids are fighting in school. Why would you guys do this? You guys are not gonna do nothing about this? This has happened many years too, and you guys have not done nothing. That's why tomorrow, like I said, I'm gonna go take a flight to Sacramento, and I'm gonna say the same thing to see if they do something about this, because I'm seeing that you guys are not doing nothing. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Maria Daisy Ortiz. Maria Daisy Ortiz, come on up. You'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin.
¿Estamos listos?
Oh, entonces puedo hablar de corrido. Ok. Buenas tardes,
Good
distinguida
afternoon, distinguished
concurrencia. Mi nombre
members of the board. My name is Maria Daisy Ortiz, and I am here concerned about the ping pong game that you had, some tossing the balls onto others, to come into 3 days to accomplish this, sacrificing our students that had no 1 day of instruction is 1 week missed. And let's not say how many 3 days. It's almost a month of falling behind. My question to you is, how will you recuperate that lost learning for our students? Because it was our children that were most impacted. They stopped learning most of all because spring break is coming. Now, the employees already had their spring break along with you due to the strike, because now from spring break, the students will come to the LPAC exam for English learners and SBAC for students that are in 3rd through 11th grade. Do you believe that our students are prepared? Because you think of yourselves, but do not think of the children. And you talk about a strategic plan, the superintendent, his leadership that is authoritarian because he does not respect parents, he does not respect the students, and he does not respect his employees, because it is easy to talk when they're almost making the same salary as the president of the republic, and not to make effective actions because he doesn't consult with anybody about closing the schools. You did not care. So my question to you is, how will you recuperate the learning lost for our students? Stop practicing fallacies with academic excellence when there is lack of personnel for teaching staff, lack of teaching assistant of TSP, but you do set aside in the budget, and those funds are returned. And we will not have academic excellence in cutting programs that support our students to accelerate their learning. In 2 days, you want to accelerate learning? How much were those days, those 2 days, acceleration days? Was it worthwhile for a 7% that they said? Because if a semester, the student doesn't meet academic excellence, I don't think that they'll meet it in 2 days. So stop working promoting your personal and political agendas, because we need for our students to meet the promises, your demagogues. You love to speak beautiful with the media, but your actions speak for themselves. And so I hope that this action and that this error is corrected, because our students do not have to pay for your incompetency. Good afternoon, and thank you.
Thank you for your time. Mr. Juan Mangandi, I see you're here. Come on up. You'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin.
Good afternoon. You learned. They always take away our voice, and now three. So before starting today, I want to know if Ms. Tania Ortiz and Ms. Coley Gones, if they get any type of allergy to see us, because every single time the parents talk, they leave. So tell them that we're parents and that we pay for their salary, and I hope that they can be here, because there's a few times when their comments, they're not here. I think that is the problem with privileged people, that they don't like unprivileged people. I want to start Mr. Carvalho with this, because I would imagine what 30% to be increased for Mr. Salcido and for Mr. Antonio Plasencia. How much would 30% be of a $370,000 or $270,000? Let's not say $444,000. The grave problem, serious problem that we see is that you're talking that you are for the children, and that's just a fraud. That called being a demagogue, because you say that are for the children, but you're thinking of yourselves. What have you done for our children? It's beautiful to have 30%. SEIU got 100% of what they were demanding. The extortion, it does work with you then. But what happens with our children? What have you done with our children? They've lost how much time of our children? And this has a racist connotation. I want you to listen. This is a racist connotation, because 72% of our students are Latinos. And what are you doing for our community? At least the African Americans are advancing in their life conditions. They have positions, but us Latinos, we have an elite. that discriminates amongst us, that is oppressing those at the bottom. I asked Mr. Pedro Salcido when he has thought of those at the bottom. Mr. Antonio Plasencia, they're inventing norms, codes, regulations. For what? To oppress those at the bottom, because we, the children, are not competing at the university level, and that is called racism. We are 72%, and is the community that is left behind, more left behind. Thank you to you and your progressive agenda. Those, you are the advocates, the champions of immigrants. Are you interested in our children? Because they're the ones that will vote and that will have in the Democrat Party so that they can vote for you. Sequestering our students' future. That is what you're doing. And it's beautiful, this about the unions. It's extortion. That extortion that now UTLA comes, and I don't know what they will demand. Another 15 days after the break, after spring break, because here you get it by extortion, and because you have to pay the political favors because you don't care about our children. Our children for you are just simply an instrument to keep your privilege, not because you care. Our children are just loose, and you'll see how many students in drugs and gangs, how many students stealing and fighting, and you are here, right, playing as gods, just like those two ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Okay, we're going to come back to Karina Lopez. You were online just a moment ago. Karina Lopez. Press *6 to unmute yourself, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak once you begin. We'll wait about 20 seconds for you to press *6 to unmute yourself. Por favor, oprime 36 para hablar y tiene 3 minutos. Adelante. Karina Lopez. Okay, that is all the time we have for public comment. Is there anyone I didn't call who is in the audience and is on our list who signed up? Second call for Irene Morales. Okay, that ends our public comment, and I want to say a special thank you to our translations unit who was able to put together the use of these simultaneous translation units, along with the cooperation of our folks in KLCS who are doing an amazing job. Thanks very much. Back to you.
Any adjourning motions, Dr. Rivas?
Yes, I have one adjourning motion. Thank you, Madam Chair. This adjourning motion is in memory of Mark Sepulveda. He was a building and grounds worker at Hollenbeck Middle School. Mr. Sepulveda was dedicated 35 years to Hollenbeck Middle School as a building and grounds worker. He was also a Garfield High School Bulldog alumni. Mark was a gentle giant, very kind-hearted, looking out for others, and always stood for what was right. Amongst his peers, he was known as a hopper room attorney, always advocating for his coworkers to be treated fairly. Mark was full of wisdom and loved to share it. He inspired many of a Hollenbeck community in so many ways. He mentored young students and encouraged them to take pride in their school by keeping it clean. He helped new teachers become acquainted to Hollenbeck Middle School, helping them become familiar with room and office locations. He always lent teachers a hand in assisting them with moving rooms or cleaning out their classrooms at the beginning and the end of the year. He took great pride in maintaining a clean and safe campus. He is going to be really, truly missed. Rest in power, Mr. Mark Sepulveda. Thank you.
Hearing none, that was a motion to adjourn. Hearing no objections, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. It's 4:34 p.m.